section 3, or chapter 3, I should say, section 3. And we were working somewhere around in the Phil Gasper's edition, paragraph 52. I'm going up a little bit, but it was the area where it says, hence, they reject all political and especially all revolutionary action. Now, to recall what we're talking about these communes. And for clarity, because of the things that I want to bring out in this discussion, and like I said, I sort of had, through the grace of the Almighty, if He allow, I sort of wanted to do this by itself. But since this came up, I figure we can discuss pieces of this. Now, these are the communes that we're looking at. And even though Karl Marx, he isn't necessarily making reference to, yes, it has started. He isn't necessarily making reference to religious communes per se. The religious communes are included, but his focus are those people who just wanted to see social changes for everyone. They wanted to make these social changes, but not change the social system or the structure politically. And so we made an attempt last week to look at that. The Messiah, he recognized a class distinction. And that's another thing Marx was explaining, that the people in these communes, they really don't recognize the working class or the class distinctions. And you find this in regular secular communes, and I found it especially in religious communes. And I'm going somewhere with this. So there is no class distinctions. And on top of that, what I was just making reference to, they don't want to change things politically. And that's how it is in the religious communes, where they believe everything should stay as it is until Christ comes. And I'm not saying this necessarily to be funny, but at the end of the day, just to be honest, if a man come out of the clouds, then you'll be raptured or whatever. That'll happen. But if it don't happen like you imagine it to happen, that's what I want to look at today, then you may be thrown off. You may be thrown off. Okay? So we want to look and see that there will be a political change. Now I will argue we must be open on how this political change takes place. And the processes which leads to this political change. Many of us think that as we say, the coming of Christ, I will argue a lot of people don't really know. They have an imagination on how it looks, but they really don't know how it looks. And I want to present some stuff tonight to present a different perspective of the man coming out of the clouds, or the rapture and stuff like that. And ultimately what leads to political power. Now, our imaginations could take us one place, but we always got to be open for the processes. We don't know how these processes takes place. Just like Israel, they didn't know the processes that led to the Messiah, or how the Messiah would come. That's what threw them for a loop. They didn't expect for him to come as a peasant, The way they imagined him coming, destroying the Roman Empire on a white horse, coming with an army to destroy the Romans, the way they imagined it, it didn't happen. So while it was happening, they were all, they didn't know. They didn't know the time of the visitation. And that's what the Messiah declared. He said, if only you would have known the time of your visitation, but now it's hidden from you. So now your house is going to be made unto you desolate. So we can imagine the visitation of God to be one way, but how is it really? And I believe that as we look into politics, and when I mean politics, I don't mean American Democrat, Republican politics. I mean the way in which the world runs. Okay, as I said before, this dialectical materialist method of interpreting the scriptures by using the processes of the world around us, gaining more of a practical understanding on how things are fulfilled. Now, if you notice what Marx is saying here, hence he said they reject all political and especially all revolutionary action, these communes. So most religious communes, they're going to tell you they don't have to deal with nothing like that. They're not into politics. They ain't worried about all of that stuff that we talking about. Is, for many of them, they're not interested. But for those who searching, they may find some interest in what we're saying because, all right, I learned this way, but at least let me investigate. Now, he says they wish to attain their ends by peaceful means and endeavor by small experiments necessarily doomed to failure, and by the force of example to pave the way for a new social gospel. So he said their little experiments, their little communities that they see that the people setting up, they're doomed to failure. We've seen that. I mean, I know when I was coming up, one of the first teachers that I ran into over 20 years ago was The Kingdom of Yah by Ben Amin. In fact, it was one of the first. Ben Amin and Rudolph Windsor, these were the first men that I read. This was the first literature I ran into pertaining to Hebrew Israelites. That was the first literature I ran into. Not to say that's when I first learned about Hebrew Israelites, but when I first learned about these classes of teachers. Ben Amin, and he set up a community. He first set his community up in Africa, in West Africa, and then he later on moved to Israel. But we're going to give you some examples of this tonight. However, they collapse, or but Ben Amin was really close to the practical applications of the scriptures. That's one thing I did appreciate about him. But not all these communities are doing that. And what I'm saying, you could say, well, Brother Judah, you're wrong, and Brother Judah very well could be wrong. Okay, now I say, if you see that man coming, something happening, you raptured, then Brother Judah was wrong. You still raptured, right? But if what I'm presenting is along the lines of truth, or is the truth, or whatever, then I believe, what will you lose? Now, I'm going to show you what I mean, why I take this stance, okay? Now, these little small experiments, he said, they necessarily doomed to failure, and by the force of example to pave the way for a new social gospel. So they want to set up these little experiments, and they paving the way for a new social good news. All right, and that's what these little communes are setting up. They move on the land, and they get their little communities set up and all this other stuff. And if you do some research on these communities, you'll be surprised on when you misunderstand the scriptures and you set these communities up. It's treacherous. It's treacherous, especially when you're talking about religious communities. I would say, I won't say most of them overall, but many that I heard into, when it comes down to this thing with marriages, and oh my goodness, I mean, they take it to an entirely different level, man. I'm telling you, that's one big thing. If you're going to look into any kind of community, you want to have your doctrine down. You want to understand this Bible, okay? Because it leads into, I'm telling you, but we won't be able to get through them all tonight by no stretch of the imagination. But I'm just telling you just a few, of these communities that I have run into. But anyhow, notice They're paving his way of this new social gospel, right? Now, such fanciful pictures of future society painted at a time when the proletariat is still in a very undeveloped state and has but a fanciful conception of its own position, correspond to the first instinctive yearnings of that class for a general reconstruction of society. Now, I'm going to give you an example. Early in America, when America was just developing, during the days of slavery, more specifically during the days of Sojourner Truth. Now, Sojourner Truth was actually a part of a commune too. It was called the Kingdom. She was a part of this commune for 2 years. It was set up here in upstate New York by a guy named Robert Matthews. He changed his name to Prophet Matthews. He ran into a man who had some money whose name was Elijah. I can't remember Elijah's last name, but eventually Elijah changed his name to the Tishbite and called himself Prophet Elijah. They went and bought a house. They got some land. They got a house right outside of Manhattan and some land. They set up this community called the Commune. And guess what happened? First thing that seemed to normally happen with some of these communes is the sexual scandals. That happens because of this polygyny thing, all right? But Matthews is a little different because he believed that the kingdom of God, which was coming, was for men, which indirectly a lot of people teach that today. You know, he was just more pronounced about it. But at the end of the day, it's really a male chauvinist tint to these religious communes because I argue they're really not diligent Bible students. What else happens in these communes is what we call today pedophilia and everything else. All right. But Sojourner Truth, for example, in these communes which were setting up, he had a fanciful idea about the kingdom of God coming, Mr. Matthews. But, you know, Sojourner Truth only dwelt in that commune for 2 years. The records say the reason why Sojourner Truth left this commune because she felt she wanted to do more for the social conditions of women and black people. That's why she went up and down the landscape. That's why she adopted the name Sojourner Truth. So she had left the commune. And when I was studying that, it let me know how idle the communes are. See, they gonna sit and wait. They have this idealist imagination of the kingdom of God. But Sojourner Truth said people need help today. And so she had left the commune after 2 years. Later on, she joined another commune. I don't know the end of that. You know, what happened at the end, I didn't follow up too much on that one. But she was a part of Matthews. And what happened? Matthews wind up killing a man. He abolished the marriages. The man who he bought the land with, they say Matthews did. He got poisoned. And it just fell to pieces. You understand? And you just find this kind of stuff happen all the time. Ben Amin, who I talked about earlier, same thing. He set up the Kingdom of Yah commune. And what happens all of a sudden now? He is the Messiah of the day. They speak against Paul. They tell you, you know, you got to be cautious going to the New Testament. When you start hearing these words, brothers and sisters, it's a problem. I'm telling you, take this book. Don't let nobody have you deny the book, because once they can cause you to cast doubt on the Bible, who becomes the authority? You got to think about this. The man who's teaching you becomes the authority, right? Because he's telling you, well, this is mistranslated. So he got to show you the proper translation. Look, I'm telling you, the Most High didn't let nothing happen to these books. That was never an idea. It never came out of the Messiah's mouth. And once you read the books, you realize there's nothing missing. There's other literature out there, but there's nothing missing. Okay? So you have the multitude of prophets saying the same thing, but there was a school of prophets in the days of Israel, but they all had the same message. So it's not necessary to put 200 prophets in. All I need is 3 or more. Because that's what the Torah says as witnesses. So this is what you have. You don't have people make you believe that you had this one big book called the Bible and people took stuff out of it. No, it was never that way. It was a compiling of different prophets and writings. And these prophets that you realize when they're saying the same things. But that is the authority when it comes down to Paul and the apostles. They are the authority. if you go into these places now, these teachers, whoever they are, whether in the commune or not, they start telling you, oh, this mistranslated, this shouldn't be here and this shouldn't be. That's a red flag. Now, that's my advice to people. They could take it or leave it. And I'm talking from experience, just running into people. But I was taught from my grandparent that the Bible is the authority. And you need that as your authority. Because if a man becomes the authority, then you have a problem. And next thing you know, he casting the Bible away. Anything that don't agree with his doctrine, guess what he's going to tell you? It's mistranslated. Okay? So believe the Bible. And that's what happened with these different communes. They going in there, they coming back with some nonsense, and they causing the people. Ben Amin said he was the Messiah. You had another commune set up called the Temple of Love. Guess who the Temple of Love was run by? Hulan Mitchell. You all may know him by his Yahweh Ben Yahweh. He set up in Florida, built a massive empire economically. Okay. And the list go on and on and on and on. And when I look at these different communities, what do I examine? Their doctrines. It's always their doctrines. So I'm adding that part in here so we can get this stuff together. That's why here we need people to be Bible students. You got to be a Bible student. And that is the authority, the Bible. The Bible is the authority. If there's something in there that look like a contradiction, guess where you start? With yourself. Saying, maybe I'm looking at it wrong. That was the rule of thumb when we was coming up. If there's anything in the Bible that look like it's a contradiction, guess what? Guess who got it mixed up? Not the Bible, but we do. So we got to go back. And I found that rule of thumb to be very rewarding because years later, you'll come back and find out, yes, the Bible was right. All right? So that's the rule of thumb. Yes, Rudolph Windsor. Yes, from Babylon to Timbuktu. Yes, it was an amazing story on how I first got a copy of that book. But yes, that was it. Rudolph Windsor and God, the Black Man and the Truth by Ben Amin. That was the first books they had written, I believe. But look, so they're coming with these social experiments that's doomed for failure. All right? So I don't care how they look in its heyday. They all get their little heyday, they reach their peak. And next thing you know, they do whatever they're doing because they can't resist the system. They don't even acknowledge the system. They don't acknowledge what's happening socially. And they have taught us to read the Bible to make us believe that the Bible not even really concerned on what's happening socially. And that's one of the reasons why we go through the teachings we're going through to show you all through the prophets. The Bible always addressing something that's happening in the social arena. I mean, you can't leave one of these prophets without discussing that. That is the backbone of the text. And once we realize the manner in which the Bible is written and its theme, then it will make sense. Starting from Genesis, it will make sense. The distribution of the goods of the earth, distributed in equity. He starts off about this rich planet full of everything. I mean, just rich and plentiful. Okay? But we got other teachings on that. But right now, they paving the way for this new social gospel. Now, he says such fanciful pictures of future society painted, right, at the time when the proletariat was still in its undeveloped stages. And that's why I brought up Sojourner Truth. Because even though things was going on, whether it was Sojourner Truth or whether it was Harriet Tubman, the proletariat we know today wasn't fully developed. Okay? People didn't really realize it. Just like the mission that Sojourner Truth started, the mission that Sojourner Truth was a part of. She didn't start it. The mission that Harriet Tubman was a part of. Okay? They didn't realize the social conditions which was developing. That's why Harriet Tubman set an example for us. Sojourner Truth set an example for us not to be so religious and just deal in our religious idealism, but they applied their religious beliefs to the social environment, to the concrete environment. So she said, listen, God is one who freed the slaves. He stands for the oppressed. And Harriet Tubman ran off that. Sojourner Truth used that, and they applied it socially. Now, why am I saying this? But yet and still, if you as Sojourner Truth fought for what they thought was freedom, these were the beginning stages of freedom. Harriet Tubman, these were the beginning stages of freedom. And there was always a reminder that you wasn't free. That's why when they began to steal the commodity called the slave, bring them up north, then they begin to pass laws that they can go and retrieve the slaves past the Mason-Dixon line. All right, they begin to pass laws. Then they had to go up into Canada. The master, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, was revealing to us that social system of capital. It's beyond a slave master that we know it today. That's the deceitfulness of the popular what do you call this, media. Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth fought against the capitalists as they were clothed in agricultural capitalism. Okay, some may even call it a feudal type of society. But if you notice, when Harriet Tubman went up north, what happened? In order for her to fund her mission, she had to sell herself to the northern capitalist. So she had to be a maid. She had to labor for whether it was the United States Army or the United States government. She had to sell herself again. But they don't focus on that part. The only way that would be recognized that Harriet Tubman wasn't free, she was just in the mission of fighting against the agricultural capitalists. But she fell prey, like many of us, like if not all of us, we have fallen prey to the northern capitalists. Okay? But because the proletariat, as Marx is explaining here, because the proletariat development wasn't full, they didn't really realize what was happening. So they believe they come up here, they get a job, they free, because they didn't realize what this mode of production that's creating the proletariat. They didn't realize that it was just as oppressive, even more so. Because when the proletariat, when winter months come for the proletariat, the boss will lay you off. When you was under agricultural slavery, then he still had to take care of you whether he was working or not. All right. So actually, the northern proletariat, or the proletariat, and the Industrial Revolution made it much cheaper for the capitalists than owning slaves. So it's a lot behind that. But again, I'm making this reference because the proletariat was still undeveloped even at that day, back in Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth. They didn't really see it clearly, but they seen enough to set examples for us. Okay? Now, notice what else he's saying. It was, as he said, such fanciful pictures of future society painted at a time when the proletariat is still in a very undeveloped state and has but a fanciful conception of his own position, correspond to the first instinctive yearnings of that class for a general reconstruction of society. So they see, okay, changes got to be made because, they was going up north. It was Harriet, that let you know Harriet Tubman lived in poverty. She almost lost her house. She lived in poverty. So the effects was there, but they didn't recognize the evil of the capitalist mode of production that was developing in the form of the capitalist bourgeoisie and the proletariat. They only recognized it at that time as the capitalist slave owner. 54, section 54 in the Phil Gasper's edition, it starts off, but these socialist and communist publications contain also a critical element. Now he's going back to what we were reading a few weeks ago. That literature that they found in France, that literature that literature that was exposing the capitalists. Okay, so this is what he's bringing back into the table. These communist publications contain also a critical element. So they got some good stuff in it, he's saying. They attack every principle of existing society. Hence, they are full of the most valuable materials for the enlightenment of the working class. That's why I want us to deal, as we deal with more political education. Don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about studying Bush and Trump. That's not what I mean by political education. I'm talking about real political education from revolutionaries. Okay, not this stuff that we get on mainstream TV. So that's why I tell everyone, get that www.marxist.org, log it, because they have these valuable materials for the enlightenment of the working class. That's why I make reference to that. All right. These materials are still in existence, and we got to study it. This is studying the world around us, and we got to apply this to the scriptures, because the scriptures deal with the real world. If we don't do it, look at what's happening. Look around us. Most of us could testify things are getting worse. I heard today that they talking about cutting SNAP benefits. Anybody hear SNAP benefits? April 1st, they're going to cut a lot of people off of it, according to the latest update I received. That's going to make a lot of people desperate, but they ignorant, so they don't really know what's going on. So therefore, people will get violent, and that's going to justify more law and order. Now, look at this. It says the practical measures proposed in them, speaking of this, these valuable materials of education for the working class, the practical measures proposed in them, such as the abolition of the distinction between town and country. And we could get into that as well, but normally the country is exploited by the town. Okay, so as long as they're creating a city, and the way things are divided up now, and they have the country is always exploited by the town. So if you abolish the social system and you get rid of town and country, it just be a place where people live, then the antagonism will go away too. But I mean, that's a quick answer to that, but God willing, we could get into that in the future. Abolition of the distinction between town and country, of the family, okay, of the carrying on of industries for the account of private individuals, and of the wage system. So they're talking about all of this. The abolition of antagonisms, okay, or the distinction between town and country, all right? Talking about what's going on among the families, the industries that's owned by private individuals. They're exposing a wage system. The proclamation of social harmony. So they talk about we need to have more of a classless society where it's social harmony. All of this is in the valuable materials that's being presented. The conversion of the functions of the state into a mere superintendence of production. So there's no people per se, a small group of people who run the state, but the people will, as he said, the proletariat, which we've been studying, the state will become the people will become the state, and then the state apparatus, which are run by the people, will be used as a mere instrument for the distribution of the goods, all right, and how they're produced. All these proposals point solely to the disappearance of class antagonisms. At the end of the day, if we want all of this to be straightened out, the family, industry, town and country, stop being exploited, all at the end of the day, we are talking about doing away with what? Class antagonisms. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, excuse me for that. All right, so look, we're talking about doing away with class antagonism. Now remember, this literature is there, and these communes use this literature Marx is explaining, more or less secular communes. But in our study, we're bringing in religious communes. They have the same effects. Only thing is, with religious communes, they don't talk about this. They don't talk about what is needed for the abolition of class antagonisms. You ask them, how do we abolish class antagonism? The common answer you will get is that it's going to happen when Christ comes. Okay, what's that? How that look? I mean, what does that entail? You know what I'm saying? My children got to eat today. Well, when Christ comes, he'll take care of it. And then if you press them too hard, Then they'll really show their colors. Then they'll say, well, you know why you ain't got nothing and why you starving and you homeless? Because you ain't been keeping the commandments. See, that's the ace in the hole right there. I said, boy, these people, and I've heard them say it. Like I said, I've heard so-called Hebrew Israelites say they don't even, they'll read Ecclesiasticus where it says, don't give anything to the wicked. And let them know anybody out in the street hungry, they wicked. I said, well, how do you explain Lazarus? But I mean, they're not even reasonable. I'm just speaking hyper. You can't even reason with these guys. They're not even really reasonable. These cats, like the scriptures say, he gonna be evil, let them be evil still. You understand? But anyhow, they don't really deal with this at all. Now, that's why I feel in this ministry or in this work, this is all Bible. Everything that's happening in the world today is Bible. Okay? All of it. The Bible talk about the real world and vice versa. So don't let us not separate the Bible, like how the West separated church and state. Don't do that. That's how people tricked. It's all together. Especially when you really learn what church means. Now, it says, all these proposals point solely to the disappearance of class antagonisms, which were at that time only just cropping up, and which in these publications are recognized in their earliest, indistinct, and undefined forms only. So the French in their revolution, like that's what he was explaining earlier, they was doing revolution. They seen where this proletariat and this bourgeoisie was going. And that's why they writing about it, even before it was fully developed all over the rest of the world. And that's why the literature is so valuable today, to understand the French Revolution, to understand the revolution that have taken place throughout the centuries. It is they were speaking, you know how you say people, they're ahead of their time. So if you see what Marx is explaining here, even what he's writing in the Communist Manifesto, written in the mid-1800s, is really relevant today. You could see it even more today, because they seen the Most High allowed these men to see it happening. Okay? So, the Fugitive Slave Law Act. Yes, that was it. The Fugitive Slave Law Act. That's what they had passed to retrieve the slaves as they were escaping up north. Church is actually the word ecclesia. It was used by Augustus Caesar. In fact, no, more or less, gospel was associated with Caesar. Okay? Because the political agenda that Augustus Caesar had implemented in Rome allowed a lot of people to get rich. So they had this gospel or good news of Caesar. Church, ecclesia, was used by the Greeks and the Romans. It represented the political body who would come together and discuss political matters and approve laws in the state. So these was all political references. And Paul borrowed these references because the kingdom of God is political. Okay? Yes, the capitalists have church on Capitol Hill. That's right. That is their temple. And we discussed that on the Thanksgiving thing, where we had showed you the up in a ceiling of the Capitol building, where they got Minerva and all of the gods who assisted, Thomas Jefferson and all of them. That is their temple. Yes. Yeah, you're going to get it together. Don't worry about it. That's right. I knew where you was going with it, though, mother. I knew where you were going. Don't worry. That's why, repetition. That's why we go over and over again. We're going to get it. We're going to get it. Don't worry about it. So notice what he's saying. The significance of critical utopian socialism and communism bears an inverse relation to the historical development. In proportion, as the modern class struggle develops and takes definite shape, this fanciful standing apart from the contest, these fanciful attacks on it, lose all practical value and all theoretical justification. Therefore, although the originators of these systems, as they separate themselves from the politics, they're not paying attention to the working class. He's saying, therefore, although the originators of these systems were in many respects revolutionary, their disciples have in every case formed mere reactionary sects. They hold fast by the original views of their masters in opposition to the progressive historical development of the proletariat. That's true. And I'm going to give you another example. When you really study this, the same thing happened with the Essenes. If the record is true, the founder of the Essenes allegedly is Onias III. He's written about in 2nd Maccabees, 3rd Maccabees, and 4th Maccabees. Onias III was the prime minister of the nation. And he was so famous because he had a common pot that it was filled with treasures of money that was to take care of the social evils that could befall anyone. But since Onias was this prime minister that made sure that there was wealth in the treasury for everyone, they counted him as a righteous man. In other words, you weren't going to go hungry around Onias. And this started the thing with Antiochus Epiphanes when they tried to rob this treasury of Onias III. But he was a political figure. And the wealth he had was to deal with people in need and make sure the wealth was available. Some interpretations of or should I say translations of the books of Maccabees tell you he had a commune or a common pot. It don't actually say commune, but I believe it say a communal treasury. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but I believe they use the word communal in some translations. But the Essenes, however, they abandoned that political aspect of Onias, and they went off into the deserts or into the wilderness and set up the Essene communes, therefore not really posing a threat to the establishment. That's why when Jesus of Nazareth came on the scene, so many people was devastated. So it's something about these communes that Marx is arguing that as you study it, it runs true all the way up to this day. And it ran true 2,000 years ago. Now, as he said, they turn into mere reactionary sects. That's what happened to the Essenes. I would argue they hold fast by the original views of their masters in opposition to the progressive historical development of the proletariat. They therefore endeavor, and that consistently, to deaden the class struggle and to reconcile the class antagonisms. All right? They try to deaden the class struggle and to reconcile class antagonisms. That's an oxymoron in essence, if I understand what Marx is saying here. You can't turn away from the class struggle and also reconcile class antagonisms. In order to reconcile class antagonisms or to bring an end to the struggle between the two classes, you must engage in class struggle. That's the only way you're going to get rid of the class antagonisms. So what they're trying to do isn't practical. That's why Marx is saying it's fanciful. Him and Engels. It's make-believe. It's not going to bring us the desired results. And I would say that's the same thing with religion today. It's not bringing us these desired results. And at the end of the day, it's just simply just wait until the Lord come. But history has proven that's not how things played out. There was always this human participation to change the course of the world. And when you're changing the course of the world, you are changing the course of governments. Now, I know people saying stuff I'm talking about now just blasphemy, right? They saying, man, that's not even what you talking about. I don't know which. But look, if I'm wrong, only way you will know if you search it out. Is that true? All right. So at least I'm presenting some evidence so you can search it out. They still dream of experimental realization of their social utopias, right? Of founding individual individual phalansteries. And phalansteries are, I don't have it. Let me see here. It's in here too. Phalansteries were socialist colonies on the plains of Charles Fourier. So Fourier, it's tied in, I guess it's derived from the philanthropist, to be generous and to give or whatever. Fourier had the phalansteries. All right. And then, it's the same, pretty much same thing as a commune. So Fourier in France, that was the name of his communes. So they want to establish these individual communes or home colonies of setting up a little Icaria. And it's the same thing with the Icaria. Let me see here. I'm reading out of a different fact. Let me see if I wrote it down right next to me. I thought I had it here. Yeah, Icaria was the name given by Quebec. I haven't researched Quebec, but it was a name given by Quebec to his utopian and later on to his American communist colony. They're not giving me the first name of Quebec, but he called his utopian communes Icarias. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Icaria. All right. So in other words, they setting up these communes, right? And they still have these visions and these dreams. And remember the primary problem. They don't want to change class antagonism. They're not looking at the class struggle, but yet they want to change the social conditions. And that's not going to happen. That's why I'm starting to believe you're not going to be able to work towards the kingdom of God. The prophets say it. And I'm going to show you something tonight before we close out to show you, listen, the Messiah, remember, what we're going to read tonight, he said, blessed is the servant that I find so doing. Then I will make him ruler over I will make him ruler in my house. He's signifying political dominion. All right. Now, God willing, we're going to look at that. But it's something that the people must be doing. It's going to affect the governments. It's something that the people will be doing politically, engaging in class struggle. Why do I say class struggle? Because all the prophets talk about class struggle. It's the message of the prophets. John, all the way down to John the Baptist. It shakes up kingdoms. And when you're doing this, that's what I believe I'm arguing. That's when the forces of the Gentiles will be converted to you, because that's your message, right? Your message is the redistribution of the goods of the earth. So it makes sense. If this is your message, this is what you're working towards, then you think the nation's going to give you their wealth? What's going to come in their mind to give you their wealth? Because of the message in which you're conveying? You understand what I'm saying? But we may not think of it that way if we're looking at it in idealist terms. It's just all about, well, God going to give us the forces of the Gentiles. Why? How? They just going to wake up one day and say, listen, I'm going to give all of our wealth to these Israelites. No. It's a message. It's going to shake up the world. It is shaking up the world, and it has shaken up the world. That's what they said about Paul. Turn the world upside down. But let's finish this up so we can look into a little bit of history. He said they're going to set up these little Icarias. And notice what he's calling these little communes, whether it's the Icarias, whether it's the phalansteries, whether it's the home colonies that was set up by Owens. And that was Robert Owens. He set up his colony here in America. His only lasted for 2 years in America. It did better in Europe. He was a rich man. Big industrialist in Europe, set up these experiments. I think he bought like 2,000 acres of land. I think his colony he set up was about 1,000 people starting it. About 2 years. Some last longer, of course. Amish, I didn't bring a book with the Amish in there, but the Amish, they were originally called the Armana. I believe they're Armana community. And that's where the Amish come from. But they're losing ground. You understand? The Amish, they, as capital developed, the Amish are being devastated. And they started off as a large community here in America. So we have to look at history. We don't know what we're going to do to repeat or keep making the same mistakes. All right. So look, notice what he said. These little communes, he said, these are duodecimal editions of the New Jerusalem. What do you mean duodecimals? These are small little editions of these are, he's calling them minute, small. Because New Jerusalem is supposed to take over the world. And most people don't realize this New Jerusalem, what this is about. They think a real city coming out of the sky. I was talking to somebody about that about a week or so ago. I can't take that from you. If that's what you believe, hold that then. But then just look at this too. All right. People laugh at me when I say it, but I say when the city come down out of the sky, then I was wrong, right? If you see that city coming down out of the sky. All right. So you still don't have nothing to lose. Now, if no city come out the sky, and then what we're saying is even close to the truth, then you may have some trouble on your hands. Now, look, they set up this duodecimal editions of the New Jerusalem, and to realize all these castles in the air. See how he's making it so fictitious? Because New Jerusalem is nothing but a large golden city coming out of the sky. And they are compelled to appeal to the feelings and purses of the bourgeoisie. And normally that's what it boils down to in these communities, even the religious communities. Who get ranked? The people with the money. They the ones who paying the tithes. They the one who buying the equipment. They the one who buying the resources. They get ranked, right? The community that Dow was encouraged, Ralph Stair. I called him Robert, but it's Ralph Stair. You all who old enough to remember that rapper, his last, it was Mac. I forget that rapper, he's doing the Coogee rap in them days. Craig Mack. Craig Mack actually, before he passed on, he actually joined this community and was under Ralph Stair. This was one of the men who influenced Dow. In fact, Dow was his protege. Why am I saying Craig Mack? He has some money. And so when you look at Fred Stair, who set up another commune, or Ralph Stair, excuse me, he set up another commune. He in jail now for pedophilia, 84 years old, still trying to mess with them young gals. And they're saying he swindled people out of hundreds and thousands of dollars. Okay, it's the same thing wherever you go. You got to look at their doctrines. It's their doctrines. But anyhow, these are men who appeal to the purses of the bourgeoisie. All right. By degrees, they sink into the category of the reactionary or conservative socialists, those who we reviewed in times past. Even though they got revolutionary literature and they want to do it with class antagonisms, the method in which to bring it about is impractical. And since it is impractical, as they go on and live on year after year, in order for them to survive, they got to appeal to the bourgeoisie. Or else, how will they survive? Who gonna pay for the, land? Who gonna pay for the taxes? Who gonna pay the bill? You understand what I'm saying? So yes, it's only natural that's who they're gonna appeal to, because they're not in the class struggle. So they fall off into this reactionary group, differing from these only by more systematic pedantry and by their fanatical and superstitious belief, and by their and what he's saying, the pedantry, he's talking about how they're, what he say, their excessive concern for minor details. All right. And I guess what he's saying is that they're really not focusing on the greater issues. And by their fanatical and superstitious belief in the miraculous effects of their social science. This city coming out of the air, everything gonna happen, spaceships gonna come, Year 2000, same thing happened. Cast out of One West, they stand on top of the buildings, 1999, because they said at that time, Christ coming out of the sky, he going to enslave all white folks. And then they was on the top of the buildings in New York, waiting for spaceships to come. 2000, it's 2019, 20 years ago. And when it happened, those of us who've been around long enough, you know when that happened. Deshaun, you on here, you know when it happened. Them cats went underground for years, 5, 6 years, we ain't hear nothing from them. And when YouTube came out, they all started popping up one by one. IUIC, all these cats you listening to right now, GMS, you know, the cat you talked about, the big with the cat, Big Judah and all that. All of them cats, they all started to pop up. GOCC, all of them, they all come out of the One West. Sakari, he's the, you know, these are the children of the One West. But they all waited for them spaceships. It didn't happen. They have these fanciful ideas. It's the same thing happened in 2019. It was, what were they saying 2-3 years ago? Israel was supposed to go home in 2019. I didn't say nothing. They was piling up our videos, giving me thumbs down, saying I'm an agent and all this other stuff. 2 years ago, because they saying, you know, you must work for the white man. You know, this, look, man, ain't nothing going to happen in no 2019. Listen, the capitalists not about to give everything up in this in just 2 years. But because they don't have a practical application, they think we'll just snap of the fingers. It's just going to happen. And where are we at? 2019 is out. In fact, they're past the due date because it was supposed to have been 2019 of the year of August, because they came into Jamestown late August.
400 years, right?
Uh-huh.
Is that what they said, 400 years?
400 years, that's right.
Yeah.
So you're talking Jamestown 1619, Jamestown late August, August and come and gone. And you and now some of them pushing the date back now. Now some of them saying 2021. They don't get enough because of their views, the way that they're looking at the scriptures, because they're looking at this thing as idealists. They don't even see a practical application on how this is going to happen. How the hell you going to, excuse the French, how you going to go back to the land of Jerusalem in 2? You know how much stuff got to change? And what I mean, things can change rapidly when you start to see it happening. But there was, if you don't even know what to look for, listen, man, they're not about to. I can go on and on through these years, I'm telling you. But let me go on, because I heard y'all here all night just running it down with the Hebrew Israelites alone in their prophetic visions. Flee Babylon. I'm telling y'all been around 2009. Same thing supposed to happen. Missiles supposed to come and burn up America. Here it is 10 years later. Now they coming back asking for money. That's why I went with the GOCC. What y'all doing back here? Y'all left us to perish with the bombs. The bombs never came, so y'all want to come back and ask them for some money. How you like that? Now that's a slap in the face. But anyhow, I'm going somewhere else with this. Let me close out with this. They therefore violently oppose all political action on the part of the working class. This is it. All these communes, these religious groups, they're not concerned with political action on the part of the working class. And that becomes more defined as we do our studies with this political action on the working class, what it entails. It was the same thing. Look at history. Look at history. What were the political actions of Harriet Tubman? You see the network that was built of the Underground Railroad, and I will even say the northern bourgeoisie, I would argue they had a part in that. They had a part in that too. But however, we could use them. They just we can't allow them to use us. But look at the practical applications of where we are today. Harriet Tubman was a preacher. Did you know that? She was a lecturer. Sojourner Truth was a public carrier. And Harriet Tubman, she really fit Harriet Tubman really fit the glove of Deborah. She was the first woman to lead an army to go and fight against the South. John Brown called her the general. The woman didn't play games. They said she was no more than 5 feet tall. She didn't play games. But she was spiritual, and she told the people to look to the God of the Old Testament, according to the record that I read. But she just didn't stay in them church houses in the slave quarters and pray. She applied it practically, and she found out what was going on in the world. She found the Underground Railroad, and she used these facilities and these homes and these people to help fight against the Southern capitalist. So we must learn from history. And all Harriet Tubman was doing, she was working on the behalf of the working class. All right. Don't let slavery confuse you. Slaves were nothing but cheap laborers. They were a part of the working class. And they were practically identical to the agricultural workers in Europe. They was treated the same way. Most of us don't know that because television not going to tell you that because they want you to be at the throat of every white man that you see. But if you go into the agricultural districts in Europe, in England specifically, they are all treated the same way. From beatings to brandings, the quarters was the same. The way that they lived was the same. Okay, as far as the living conditions. And just like it was up north, here out of the agricultural district, the northern slaves got treated a little bit better than the southern agricultural slaves. It just depends on what part of the work you were in. All right. They therefore violently oppose all political action on the part of the working class, such action, according to them, can only result from the blind unbelief in the new gospel. In other words, in order for all this to change, you just have to have this blind, what do you say? They can only result from blind unbelief in the new gospel. So I'm sorry, he's actually saying that if you don't believe it, everything that these people want to do to fight and help the working class, they're saying that this will only result from the blind unbelief in the new gospel. All right, so this is pretty much what you're saying today. They say we're wasting our time. Let God do it. You take too much upon your shoulders. We really not believers if we doing all of this. You hear it. So we finish up with the Owenites in England and the Fourierists in France, respectively, opposed the Chartists and the Reformists. The Chartists and the Reformists were real revolutionary groups, but they were revolutionary groups for the working class. And therefore, he said the Owenites and the Fourierists, they fought against the working class movements, much like you find today. In fact, I believe a lot of people begin to turn their back on Martin Luther King when he began to stand up for the working class movement. In fact, when he began to stand up for the working class movement, he was killed. And we like to bring that out. They didn't bother Martin when he was trying to abolish class antagonisms through integration. They didn't have a problem with that. Only thing Martin did was introduce a new group of people to spend their money with the capitalists. All right, yeah, okay, now you can spend your money with us. Here, sit at our same counters, you understand? But when Martin said, listen, you got to redistribute the wealth, and he went to go on that strike with the sanitation workers, he was killed. He didn't even get fired into this movement before he was killed. But all that other stuff he was doing, integration, all of that, they ain't have a problem with that. But as soon as he went into the redistribution of the wealth, in fact, he said it himself. It didn't cost America 1 cent to integrate their schools and their restaurants. He said it didn't cost them 1 cent. But in order to redistribute and to make compensation for all of the oppressed people throughout the world, he said it's going to be a radical change. And it will cost enormous amounts of money to do this. All right? And they seen he was going on that route, and he had a lot of people who would listen to him, and Martin had to be killed. Now, and guess who schooled Martin? Welfare mothers. Martin didn't have a clue what was going on in the real working world. I heard a speech by Mumia Abdul-Jamal, in fact, it's on YouTube. And he run it down about how Martin said in one of the meetings, when he first was being introduced into this working class movement, guess who he went to? Who packed the house? Women. The women schooled him on the laws, on what's going on. Welfare mothers. You know why? Because mothers got to take care of them babies. Mothers is something in the women that they just want to abandon their house. It's not likely that a mother would do that. The dad might do it faster than the mother. And so they was in it, man. And they schooled Martin. They introduced him to this social movement. Anyhow, those other teachings, these are the things we got to learn and hook this up with the Bibles So we'll stop believing that the only women in the Bible who did anything was just Deborah and Anna. I heard one cat say, I said, listen, man, Israel had women judges. He believed that the only Israelite woman judge was Deborah. Now, what kind of thinking is that? All of the judges in Israel, just because she's the only one mentioned, you believe she was the only one ever. And that's the kind of stuff, that's the kind of garbage we're dealing with. The way, that's the way we're being taught the Bible. But anyhow, I'm here to tell you, no, that's not likely. All right, you got a lot of women who was in there holding down in the struggle. And the Bible gives us hints and clues that they existed. You understand? So let's look into this. We're going to open it up in about 20 minutes, all right? These communities. I want to look at this thing real quick. This is out of Communities magazine. This is the article number 92. And I believe there's a 96th issue. It says, from monastics to Moravians, 20 centuries of Christian community. Now, in fact, before I read this, I want to show you something here. This is out of something else. No, it's not, actually it's the same magazine. Actually, I just didn't copy it. Fall 1996 issue. Communities, Christian communities then and now. Notice the mentality. Page 24. And this is Communities Journal of Cooperative Living. Again, fall 1996, issue 92. This is page 25, actually. It says, some of the book of Acts describes the followers of Jesus who already had been living together in Jerusalem as a rather unintentional community. In order to survive all that followed as a result of the torture and execution of Jesus, they were huddled together in Jerusalem in fear. In fear themselves, also wanted by the authorities. Roman and Jewish officials hoped that the new, catch this, they hoped that the new spiritual movement inspired by Jesus was now over. But 50 days after his execution and resurrection, his followers were creating community. Intentional Christian communities have been with us ever since. In fact, it was before Jesus of Nazareth. I mentioned the Essenes. That's why they believed Jesus of Nazareth was a part of the Essenes, because they had communities. But did you catch what they said? This new spiritual movement. Now, what do you think about with that? This new spiritual movement. Not really concrete, not anything that you have to engage in class struggle. This is the mentality of these communes. It's spiritual. Remember we read about German ideology? It's all spiritual. Now, the way that they're looking at spiritual may be different than how I'm looking at spiritual. But according to the context of their spiritual, we're going to set up these communes, we're going to set these communes up, we're going to love and pray and do all this other stuff, and we're going to wait for Jesus to come. Nothing to engage the real world. So this is setting a context right now. These spiritual communities. Now, further on in this document, it says, after the first century Acts 2 communities, the next communal renewal movement to engage was monasticism. What are we talking about? Right? The monasteries. So after Acts 2, we go into the monasteries. And that began in the 3rd and 4th centuries. Ascetics attempting to live the perfect Christian life, or, people who practice self-discipline, or severe, as some say, self-discipline. These isolated monks gradually began to join together and eventually created the early monasteries. What were they? Isolated. Isolated from who? The rest of the world, the working people, the proletarians. So they begin to come together. Besides wishing to isolate themselves in their own ascetic Christian societies, they yearn to return to the model of the early church, to recapture authentic Christianity in its primitive fervor. Now, that's if you're looking at the early church as simply these isolated communes, right? We can get this impression. But what was the early church really? It was a prototype. It was the beginning. It was the seed. It was the little rock. It wasn't to remain a little rock. You understand? It was the little rock or the stone that was to grow into a mountain, to fill the earth. So people have put Acts 2 in a capsule, isolated it, and restricted its growth to just what they see in Acts 2. Acts 2 was a progression. That if you're going to, you don't go back to what they were necessarily doing in Acts 2 to try to recreate these communes. You're trapped in time. The communes was the beginning of the organizing of the people to take over the world. And that actually entails political movements. And this is the mentality, spiritual, or they want to just capture Acts 2 as it was. First of all, it wasn't isolated because it was in Jerusalem, a thriving metropolis. It was an urban community, number one, which a lot of people don't even mention. Now, it says the new Christian communities also emerged in the 12th and 13th centuries when Europe was undergoing rapid change. The rise of cities, there we go, the rise of cities in Europe, the creation of universities, the emergence of a new middle class. Now, we've been reading in the Communist Manifesto, who's this new middle class? The emergence of cities. What are we talking about? The development of the bourgeoisie. And many believers were calling for renewal in the Catholic Church. Several groups broke off and formed their own sects. Among them was the Waldensians, the Hussites, and the Hussites, probably from John Huss. The Catholic Church was also transformed from within with the rise of the mendicant monastic orders, the Franciscans and the Dominicans and the Carmelites. Now we're reading about this in the manifesto. Now this is a different source. The Catholic Church was in trouble. They was losing land. This was the rise of the bourgeoisie. Now we see these monasteries were setting up, the Franciscans and the Dominicans. The Catholic Church groups were breaking off of them, setting up these communes. Simultaneously, we see the rise of cities, the creation of universities, and the emergence of the new middle class. So the bourgeoisie is rising. Now, since we have this background, we can start to see why these communes failed. Now, where the monasteries at today? You may hear of the Dominicans or the Franciscans, but they don't have the same influence that they had back then. Because the cities have gotten larger, the university has gotten larger, or the capitalists have grown. And none of these communes resisted them. And this is what Marx is explaining in this Communist Manifesto. They have this dream of utopia, but they don't have a practical way of bringing it to pass. So while they're setting up their little communes, capitalism growing without resistance. Cities growing, universities growing. And what's happening? People leaving these monasteries. It says, let's move forward for time. It's a lot of different things here. It says, I want to get to another one before we go into the scriptures. How some of them fell apart. I'll read this little section. And in the 1700s, about 2 centuries after the origin of the Hutterites, another group organized themselves as a community known as Herrenhut. Organized themselves as a community in Herrenhut, Germany, known as the Moravians. Their central belief was the pietistic emphasis on personal religious conversion and faith, which guided each individual. In other words, they're just talking about being, piety, just a regular religious talk. When we read the Bible, we know piety deals directly with social justice. The rich man and Lazarus. How was that rich man to show piety? By aiding Lazarus in his social condition. The rich man and the rich young ruler. How was that rich young ruler was to show piety? He was to redistribute his wealth to the poor. All right? So when we're looking at this spiritual communities and religion, when we're looking at their piety, these are all based on idealist views. They're not based on a concrete revelation of of the scripture and the scriptural examples. Now, the Moravian community life at Herrnhut was marked by worship and piety. Worship service held 3 times daily, as well as occasional love meals and communion. These historic Christian communities emerged out of the needs of their time. Today's Christian communities are no different, arising from the current call for the renewal of the churches and ongoing search for the wholeness of our fragmented society. And they're going to try to recreate the same thing that failed. The same. So you don't hear of these Moravians, the Hutterites. You don't really hear them. They faded out. And I'm going to read this part to you. And after that, I want you to turn your Bible to 2 Peter. 2 Peter chapter 3. So this section, this is out of a book called Fire, Salt, and Peace. This book is about it's just a record of different Christian communities. And the question is, what happened to all those communities of the 70s? So now we're working our way up into the 20th century. What happened to all these communities? I want to get right down to the point. It says some community members experience exhaustion from years of activism and communal living arrangements that try to make extroverts of everyone. So now, we're not going to get into their form of activism, but I can almost guarantee, well, I can't say all of them, but very few of them dealt with the class struggle activism. All right. But because remember what Marx was saying, they did every little thing, cruelty to animals, anything that he said, all of these reactionary groups, they would do all of these different things. They have these different forms of activism, but it isn't against the social condition or the capitalist society. It says many young communitarians entered a new life stage of marriage and family commitments that left less time for ministries and meetings. Really? Now you have to question, well, what kind of ministry was going on? Religious ministries, of course, but if you're dealing with social ministries, husband and wife get out there and do that together. Just like Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman and the rest of them. Countless wounded persons found family and community. And having received some healing, they also experienced community as the parent from whom they needed to individuate or separate from. Holy Spirit power to heal also led to shepherds to get grandiose about the beliefs of submission and prophetic direction in members' lives. This is another thing that plagued communities. I'll read this again. You see this today. Holy Spirit power to heal also led many shepherds or preachers, so-called, to get grandiose about the benefits of submission and prophetic direction in members' lives. You know what he's talking about? The shepherd becomes a driver. He makes people do this. He demands your submission. That's why I say truly, we could be a guide. That's all I can be. And that's what we believe here. We're ministers of the gospel, but we could be nothing more than a guide. If Jesus of Nazareth didn't force people to do nothing, we know we can't. So we could be a guide. So you can either take the guidance or not. That's why Yeshua said, listen, y'all gonna leave too? If not, fall and reign. If so, okay. That's, But they understood, they were searching for life. So they said, where we gonna go? You got the words of eternal life. And he's telling them to search the scriptures. You understand where I'm going with this? He didn't make people do nothing. And that's the one thing we bring to the table. But you have a lot of these people who have these groups. The shepherd becomes the person that he becomes the one you got to listen to. Like I said, you got these guys now, they got their wives call them masters. I heard one so-called preacher say, he got his wives. He said his wives ain't got no time to be out here debating and everything like that. He said they're too busy being set apart and being holy. Too busy taking care of their master. And he was pointing to himself. Typical. We've seen your kind before, but you're new to other people. Typical. God, they woman got these sisters calling them masters.
Master of what?
That's the good question, ain't it? Master of what? Master of foolishness? I was watching one of them. I got to bring this one out to show you how ridiculous this is, to give you full warning. And these same little groups, this is Dow in his little group. He hooking up with these other guys, other brother we used to talk to. He don't talk to us too much no more. He probably don't want to mess around with us no more because of our angle. On one of his shows, he got this man talking about, he got this young girl calling him master. Now the young woman he's marrying, he talked about the first woman he looked at. And to test her humility, or to see if she would be in subjection to him. And I got to say this without calling him out his name. He had asked y'all probably heard me say this before. He had asked the young girl, if I told you to go over there and hug that tree, would you do it? And she said, well, I think that's pretty, demeaning. To me, it sounded like the young woman had sense. But to him, that wasn't the one. She wasn't in subjection. She wasn't ready to be in subjection because she wouldn't yield to go on a hug a tree. I could just imagine if I had a daughter, if you said something like that to my doggone daughter. That's stupidity. And that's the same foolishness that got these men having these women call them masters. You're going to ask the girl, she's going to go and hug a tree. And thank God she said that, because the Lord delivered her out of his hand. But it's going into these so-called shepherds who are driven to bring the people into submission. Okay? Now, it says some groups like Church of the Messiah in Detroit and Sojourners in Washington, D.C. found themselves forced to choose between, guess what? Becoming a nurturing body for a highly educated white families drawn to communal life, the bourgeoisie, the upper class. They were drawn between the upper class or immersing themselves in the needs of their inner city neighbors who had a very different concept of church and community. The call to the neighborhood went out, and only those who could embrace this ministry remained. So because they want to go help in the social struggle, the community struggle. All right. However, with the work that they did, I'm not privy to that, but it was something else I want to bring to the table that show you what else brought these communities down. And it was business. I thought I could find it here, but for the sake of time, I'm going to move on with it. But they had to go and earn a living, careers. All of this came into play. Why is this coming into play? Because capitalism continues to grow. So now, how are you going to support your family? because capitalism is growing and class antagonism is growing. You're not teaching the right thing. So now you're going to cater to the upper class, so-called white upper class, or you're going to cater to the, the suffering neighborhoods. Because the doctrines are out of whack, these communities struggle. Some fall apart. Okay? So now I ask you to go to 2 Peter. 2 Peter. Yes, here it is. I think this is it. Cultural forces outside community life also had their impact. Here it is. Cultural forces outside community life had their impact. Guess what those cultural forces are? Start with a C. And then the next letter is an A. Capitalism. Cultural forces outside the community life also had their impact. Idealism died in the younger generation. You remember that fictitious pie in the sky stuff? As real life hit, it shakes people up. So idealism died in the younger generation, and pursuit of lucrative careers took over as a dominant motivation. Ronald Reagan entered the White House, and the glorification of self-interest seemed to sweep all before it. And Ronald Reagan was another one who sort of put an end to the communist movement in Russia. So with that being said, these are these communities. And we got to examine the doctrine of these communities. Do they have idealist doctrines? What are they? Are they dealing in politics? How are they viewing the kingdom of God? How are they viewing the coming of Christ? What should we be doing? Should we just sit back and wait till Christ come? All of these questions we need to ask. We cannot just look at this community buying land. We mad at the white man. We mad at the rich man. So now they got land, so we're going to move off on land. No. You looking at it that shallow, you're bound to be deceived. Now, the reason why I'm going to go to Peter chapter 3. Peter, 2 Peter chapter 3, starting at verse 7. Now, I want you all to be with me on this one and examine something. Now, we have more teachings on it. But notice what Peter's saying. Peter talking about the day of the Lord. And I know we've been commonly taught there's only one day of the Lord, but I've come to believe different. I have read about the day of the Lord quite often. It's a day of judgment, day of darkness, and it has happened. I will argue that the day of the Lord came upon the southern aristocrats down south. Fire and smoke and brimstone. And guess what they call it today? The Civil War. Crush those aristocrats. The day of the Lord, the day of judgment. I'm getting these definitions from the prophets, though. And I want to read a prophet before we close out. But we got one more week left. Now notice what Peter's explaining. To establish why the doctrines are so important. Day of darkness, the day of darkness, not literal, day of darkness, ignorance, day of darkness, ignorance, and a day of a collapse of certain societies. Like the Southern aristocratic government was shaken up during the Civil War. Okay? The czars was crushed in 1917. Crushed. But anyhow, we'll get to that, God willing, in the future. Now notice what Peter's explaining, 2 Peter, the 3rd chapter. Starting at verse 7. And I'll be doing good once I get to Peter. I'm about to start reading in John. 2 Peter, the 3rd chapter. It says, but the heavens and the earth, which are now, by the same word, are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. Right? Now look, How do we imagine this in traditional church? The entire earth being on fire. Just, Peter said the elements going to be on fire. And we think the little elements. I said, you saying the air going to be on fire? Even fire got to be on fire because fire is an element. You understand? But that's what happens when we're looking at it this way. Now look. It is reserved against the day of judgment and perdition for who? Ungodly men. See, the heavens and the earth, which are now, he's talking about that world structure, not the material trees and grass. Brother Judo, how do you know this? Because the prophet said that could never be destroyed. That could never be destroyed. Right? And that's the promise made with David. If this earth could be destroyed, then a promise made with David to bring forth the godly seed, Yshua of Nazareth, is broken. All right? It could never be destroyed. It is the world as we know it, not the literal trees and grass and dust and atmosphere. Verse 8. But beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, and as 1,000 years as one day. The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some men count slackness, but is long-suffering to usward, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. Now notice verse 10. Hold on, bear with me a little bit. I'll really get these sniffles. Verse 10. Everybody look at verse 10. Get a good look at it, too. Now, verse 10 says, but the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise. The elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works. You see what he's saying? The earth, as we know it, also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. Now, how do you burn up works? Now, remember, it's only going to affect who? The ungodly. Now, he said it shall melt. It says, the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, violently. And when he said the heavens, we talk about the same heavens and where the principalities lie. The principalities and powers in the high places. These same heavens, if you look it up in the Greek, the high places, the heavenlies. All right? We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities in the heavenlies. These heavens, same heavens that Israel scattered in. I should gather you from the four winds of heaven. This world order, who he's calling the heavenlies, and the sun and the moon and the stars that represents the powers of this world order, shall pass away with a great noise. Now, I'm going ahead of myself, but we have a teaching on it, but I'm giving you a heads up. Now, you can research on your own, but I'm going to give you something else. You see this word melt? In fact, let's start with elements. Elements, you see that word elements? That's 47:47 in the Greek. 47:47 in the Greek. It means principle or rudiment. It's not talking about the elementary tables that we find in science. Now, the same word is used. Now, I want you to keep it here in Peter, but I want to give you an example of what I'm talking about. Let's go to Galatians chapter 4. Galatians chapter 4. So we can understand how this is used. Peter's talking about the social order shall pass away with a great noise. And notice what these elements are. That shall be, we're going to look at melt too. But first, let's look at these elements. Galatians chapter 4, verses, let me see. I want to get right to it. Galatians 4. And let me skip down. Let's get right down to the point. Yeah. Verse 1. Now I say that the heir, as long as he is a child, differ nothing from a servant, though he be Lord of all, but is under tutors and governors until the time appointed of the Father. He's talking about the covenants. All right, but notice what he's going to bring in. Even so we, when we were children, were in bondage under the elements of the world. You see that? We were in bondage under the elements of the world. But when the fullness of the time was come, God sent forth his son, made of a woman, made under the law. He's talking about the principles, the rudimentary principles of the world. But notice, skip down a little bit. This is what shall be melted. Verse 8, howbeit then, when ye knew not God, ye did service unto them which by nature are no gods. How did you do service? Through doctrines, through principles. Notice what he's explaining. But now, after that, ye have known God. In other words, you've been filled with knowledge. Or rather, are known of God. You know God and you are known of God. How turn ye again to the weak and what? Beggarly elements, whereunto you desire again to be in bondage. You see how these elements are teachings and principles? Same word in Colossians. The rudimentary elements, or the rudiments of the world. That same word rudiment, the same word element. What shall be on fire or burned up? He first said it shall be melted. Back in Peter. Reason why I'm saying it, because this is a conflict in doctrines. What happened? How did they begin to know God? Messengers of truth begin to teach them. Now, Paul is explaining, once you begin to learn this truth, why you want to turn back to these principles. But what happens to the principles when you abandon these principles? They're dissolved. In fact, if everyone abandoned these principles, what happens? They're melted or dissolved out of the world. Greek 3089, dissolve or melt. In verse 10, in Peter 3 and 10, notice what this says. The elements shall melt. Now this word melt don't mean to liquefy in this particular passage. Verse 12 signifies liquefy because now he's getting into imagery. But here he's talking about melt. It means to dissolve or to destroy or to break up, like you break up a meeting. To break it up, to break it to pieces. So what he's explaining, the elements, the rudimentary elements, these foundational principles of the world shall be broken up. They shall be dissolved. How though? We get a hint of it in Galatians. How did the people begin to know God? Through teachings. How do you abandon these old principles? Through teachings. The more people take on to these teachings, what happens? Then these rudimentary principles begin to be devolved or broken up. They no longer have hold. That's why he said, how in the world do you desire to be brought into bondage again? Because when you heard the word, those principles was broken up. You were freed. They were dissolved. The shackles were broken up. So we're reading about, in Peter here, we're actually talking about the dissolving of the old world. But it's happening by teachings, education. How do we know this to be true? What is the commission? Let's go into Matthew. Let's go back into this Matthew again. In fact, let's try Mark 10. Let me try Mark 10 first. Let's look at this here, real in Mark 10. I believe that's what I want. And look at this. These are, did I say Mark 10? Let's try Matthew 10. Excuse me for that. Matthew 10. Peter's talking about the dissolving of the world as we know it. And we don't know how long that process takes, but I'm inclined to believe that the process has begun. Just like the image had already been smitten at the feet. He just never told us how long it'll take for the image to crack and fall and be dissolved to powder. See, we think that's going to happen in 24 hours. He never said it's going to happen in 24 hours. We know the initial impact took place with the founding of the early church. He never said how long it's going to take for this empire or that colossus to collapse. It's the same thing here with the dissolving. This process is already at work, but we might not recognize it. And that's what I want to close with this prophet to show you what I mean in Isaiah. But first, here in Matthew chapter 10, right? And in Matthew chapter 10, we have, starting at verse 16, maybe, he says what? Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But beware of men, for they shall deliver you up to the councils. These are the principalities in the heavens. They will scourge you in their synagogues, because the synagogues were the places where the Sanhedrin and the ruling elite often frequented in Palestine. Verse 18, and ye shall be brought before who? Governors, kings, for my sake. Where are the governors and the kings? Where are they? They're in the heavens. They're represented by the sun, moon, and stars. Well, what happened when these governments and kings fail? Sun, moon, and stars are darkened. Heavens pass away with a great noise. How is this happening? Because they are brought before kings, governors, for my sake, for a what? Testimony against the Gentiles. Verse 19. But when they deliver you up, take no thought how or what ye may what? Speak. For it shall be given you in that same hour what ye shall speak. You see the emphasis? Speak. This is what will destroy the principalities and the rudiments of the world. This is what's going to break them up, where they shall melt away. Speaking in the heavens. That's why he said there's a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon and his angels. He seen Satan being cast down out of heaven, right? And what did the disciples say? Master, the devils, they all in subjection unto us. You know, we casting out demons and everything else. Then he said, listen, I beheld Satan being cast out of heaven. He didn't just say that by happen chance. This is the process of the war in heaven. This is where it's happening. How is it happening? By what we speak. Now, notice this, brothers and sisters. Sometimes I'll be having a whole laundry list of scriptures, and I know once I get to them, I say, well, I'm going to have to read one or two of these. I don't want y'all to suffer. It is being recorded, though. Sometimes when I'm by myself, I can go on and on and on. But when I have people around and I see people live, I got sympathy. Bless y'all heart, bearing with it. Isaiah, though. Let's go to Isaiah. And I want Isaiah 64. Isaiah 64. And I want you to pay attention to something. It's in several other places And what I mean is that the judgments of God will go on and happen, but it will look like natural phenomena. Okay? And the people might not recognize it. See, y'all have come with the clouds already. People say, oh, they hear me say that, they get a sound clip with it. Say Christ don't come already. No. The prophets talk about that y'all have come with the clouds of heaven to bring judgment. We got to learn what this means. However, I'm going a little far, but that's not what we're going to look at tonight per se. But notice Isaiah 65. I have two records here. I have the Septuagint here, and I have our King James. And remember what we teach here. You don't get hemmed up on a letter. People say this is a mistranslation, that's a mistranslation. No, you got different words. You don't get hemmed up on a letter. The inspired truth is what's there. That's what my teacher told me. The inspired truth. You got one cat said 10 cats came out, man, and beat the guy with a bat. Other guy said this, it was about 6 guys who came out and he hit him with a pole. It's contradictions in the letter, isn't it? But is the inspired truth the same? This man just got beat with some kind of hard object. The inspired truth is the same. So therefore, this is what I was taught. It's the inspired truth. You got a lot of scribes and writers, so therefore by the letter, you may see variations. But the truth, inspired truth of the point they're making, always the same. It's the same. So nevertheless, let's look at this here. So therefore, I may read out the Septuagint, that's the Greek scripture, and I want to read out of our King James. And I want you to notice something here in Isaiah. I'm going through this because of these reactionary communes. I argue that they're not bringing us the fullness of the gospel of the kingdom or guiding us in the right way to be effective in the bringing and doing our part in bringing out the kingdom of God. That's what I'm arguing. And now, if Peter's saying that elements shall melt, and we find these elements are rudiments or the principles or the founding principles, okay? And this is what will be broken up, or as is written in our English, dissolved or melted. But notice this in Isaiah 65. I'm sorry, 64. Excuse me. Notice this, brothers and sisters. Oh, that thou wouldest rend the heavens, that thou wouldest come down, that the mountains might flow down at thy presence. Who are you talking to? The Creator. Oh, that thou wouldest rend the heavens. Now in the Greek Septuagint, it says, if you should open heaven, trembling from you would seize the mountains, and they would melt. So he said back in the King James that thou wouldest come down and that the mountains might flow down at thy presence. Do you know what governments represent in the Bible? Mountains and hills. Mountain of the Lord hosts, the mountain of God, where his temple shall be set up. This is government. Verse 2, as when the melting fire burneth, the fire causes the waters to boil, to make thy name known to thine adversaries, that the nations may tremble at thy presence. Notice what it says here. Even when you look up tremble. Yeah, this is Isaiah 64. Excuse me, brother. Isaiah 64, we have verse 2 now. Now in the Septuagint, it says, and fire shall burn up your adversaries, and the name of Jehovah shall be manifest among your adversaries. You see the same wording of Peter. Nations shall be confused at your presence. Now, the King James is saying tremble at thy presence. But what are they signifying here? Now, I'm going to show you what time frame this is, though. Because when you read it, it look like it's all in our future, don't it? Ain't not like this ever happened before. Everybody's scratching their head. This got to be in our future. The nation shall tremble at they shall be in the presence of God. Here it says they shall tremble. Other text says they shall be confused. They shall be in the presence of God, right? Verse 3. When thou didst terrible things, which we looked not for, thou camest down, the mountains flowed down at thy presence. Then he's going to get into the future blessings. But let's pick it back up as we go down to find out, when did all of this happen? Because you notice what he said, the prophetic language of Isaiah. When thou didst terrible things, which we look not for. So we got to find in this passage, well, what terrible things happened, right? So if we go down further, verse 8, but now, Yehovah, thou art our Father. Make sure I didn't go too far above. Yeah, we could pick up here. Thou art our Father. We are the clay, and thou our potter. And we all are the work of thy hand. Be not wroth very sore, O Jehovah, O Lord. Neither remember iniquity forever. Behold, see, we beseech thee, we are all thy people. Now remember what he just finished saying. Verse 3, when thou didst terrible things which we look not for, thou camest down, the mountains flowed down at thy presence. Now notice what happened though. Because he's saying, be not wroth and be not sore, right? Neither remember our iniquities. So whatever done happened came upon them. Where the mountains, where the imagery is describing the Creator coming down and the mountains melting. Verse 10. Notice the time. Thy holy cities are a what? Wilderness. Zion is a wilderness. Jerusalem a desolation. Our holy and our beautiful house, which was the temple, where our fathers praised thee, what happened to it? It's burned up with fire, and all our pleasant things are laid waste. What is he describing? The destruction of what government? The government in Israel. He's describing the government in Israel and the rulers in Israel. They've been destroyed. Their house been burned up. Their city's been destroyed. Verse 12, wilt thou refrain thyself of these things, O Lord? Wilt thou hold thy peace and afflict us very sore? Who did this, though, to them? The Babylonians. But how was it described? Verse 3, when thou didst terrible things, which we looked not for. We didn't expect this. Thou camest down and the mountains flowed down at thy presence. You see the language? So we look at the context of the passage. He's describing the destruction of Jerusalem as the Creator coming down, and then him being made known unto his adversaries. And that the nations may tremble at thy presence. Who else did the Babylonians destroy? The entire known world. You understand what I'm saying? This just didn't happen in Israel. This happened in Edom. This happened in Moab. This happened in Egypt. Nebuchadnezzar came and destroyed the entire known world. But did they recognize the presence of God, or as it was like, as the Septuagint says, the nations shall be confused at your presence? Will they even really know what's going on? So now when we look at what Peter's explaining, the same thing. He shall come and destroy the governments of the world. They shall be melted when God come visit through judgments. When he came down with the mountains, nobody literally seen a figure coming out of the sky. How was this happening? And before this happened, what was going on? The prophets engaging in social struggle. All right? Now I want to show you something before these mountains melt. We're going to close with this. Let's go to Matthew chapter 25. It's 10:30. And I promise you, we're not reading the entire chapter. But I want to point out something real quick here. This thing that Peter talking about, what the prophets was doing in Jerusalem before the mountains melted. And if anyone have any questions or comments, or, we probably not used to reading it like that. And guess what? I'm okay if people disagree. I'm okay with that. Matthew chapter 24 and 25. We want both. Real quick, we're going to look at something. Make a quick comparison. Now, Matthew chapter 24. In fact, we probably could go right in the middle at the end, toward the end of chapter 24 and toward the end of chapter 25. There's a comparison here. And this is leading up to the day of the Lord when he come and melt the elements of the world, right? This is what this is leading to. And there was an activity of the prophets before this came among Israel and the nations. That's why Ezekiel said, woe unto Egypt. They sent messages to the nations too. Y'all coming to visit. Now notice, Matthew 24. All right. And in Matthew 24, if you notice, start and keep in mind with in 25 too, but Matthew 24 and verse 37, what does it say? It says, but as the days of Noah were, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark. You see, everything seemed to be running well for a certain class of people, right? Now, he said they're going to be eating and drinking and giving in marriage and all that good stuff. Now, hold it, marker. Just look at these two, or these verses from 37 to 39, right? What are we talking about? The coming of the Son of Man, right? Verse 39, and they knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall the coming of the Son of Man be. So we're talking about the coming of the Son of Man. Now, flip right over to Matthew 25, verse 31. Verse 31 says, when the Son of Man shall come in his glory. See, we're talking about the same thing. When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all his holy angels with him, then he shall sit upon the throne of his glory. And before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats. So in verses 31 and 32, we're talking about what? The coming of the Son of Man. Go right back to Matthew 24. Matthew 24, verse 40 and 41 reads, then shall two be in the field, the one shall be taken and the other left. We see a division. Because we just finished saying, he goes, he shall what? Separate them one from another in chapter 25, as a shepherd divides the sheep from the goats. A separation. So here in Matthew 24, we see a separation. Two shall be in the field, one shall be taken and the other left. Verse 41. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken, the other left, separating the sheep from the goats. Okay? Now, if we proceed further in Matthew 24, In fact, let's go back to Matthew 25. So we see the division, Matthew 25 and 31. When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, he shall sit upon a throne of his glory, and before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats. Verse 33, and he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats where? On the left, right? Verse 34, then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, come ye, blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Now we talking about world dominion? Yes. Those on the right, those who've been separated, you shall inherit the kingdom, right? That's verse 34. Go back to Matthew 24 and verse 42. Now notice this. This is the parallels. Matthew 24 and 42. Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think the Son of Man cometh. Now remember, this is an analogy. I'm arguing that the Son of Man coming is just like Jehovah, or Jehovah came in the prophets. No one really seen a figure in the clouds. But he came, and he came down, the prophet said. So the Son of Man, we're using that language. The Son of Man, when he comes, not that you shall see a man in the cloud. He said, every eye shall see him. How that happens? Some of you just right down here in Georgia. You in Rochester. I see somebody in the clouds right here. I don't think you're going to see him in Rochester. I don't think so. Okay. Now, so shall it, but he said, know this. You don't know what hour this judgment is going to come. The coming of the Son of Man signifies judgment. That's why in the book of Revelation, he said, repent, lest I come quickly. He told the other church, repent, lest I come. The coming of the Son of Man signifies judgment. And he's explaining here. You don't know what hour this judgment is coming. Verse 45 says what? Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his house? Well, who's the Lord? The God of heaven. Where is his house? This is his throne, is the habitation, this earth. Who is this wise servant that God will give world dominion to? You understand? This is how we have to look at this. Who is the servant that God shall give this dominion to? To make him ruler. To give, notice this. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his house, to give what? Them. Y'all see that? To give them meat in due season. What do you mean? What's happening here? The faithful and wise servant is giving them meat in the proper season before the judgment comes. Do anybody know what that meat is? Who are the them in this text? You understand what I'm trying to say? Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find. So what? Praying? Sitting around? Singing? I'm not going against any of those things. All those things are very important. But right now he's saying, give them meat in due season. Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, he shall find so doing. When the judgment comes, and Yah comes again to melt the mountains and to dissolve the earth as we know it, he said, blessed are the servants that when I come, I shall find them giving them meat in due season. What kind of administration is happening here? What is the meat? Who are the them? These are all the questions we will have, right? But aren't we hooking this up with Matthew 25? That's just parallel. So do you want to know who the them are? You want to know what's the meat that they're giving? Well, let's go right over to Matthew 25. Because he said, blessed is the servant I find so doing. Now let's find out what they were doing. Matthew 25, and we will begin reading at verse 34. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, come ye blessed of my father, inherit the kingdom which prepared for you from the foundation of the world. So this is right along with the servant who shall be made ruler in all the household of his master. Verse 35. For I was what? Hunger. Didn't he just finish saying in Matthew 24, blessed is the one that give them meat in its season? Now we look what he's saying. Verse 35. I was hungered, and you what? Gave me what? Meat. I was thirsty, and you did what? You gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you did what? You took me in. Blessed is the servant that I'll do what? Find so doing. Naked, and ye clothed me. I was sick, and ye visited me. I was in prison, and ye came unto me. All of these ailments fall upon who? The proletariat, who Marx was talking about. We're looking at class antagonisms and a practical application. I was hungry, and you brought me food. John said, you got 2 coats, give your brother one. Remember that? What is he saying here? I didn't have shelter, and you provided it for me. Right? Naked, and ye clothed me. That's what John said. You got 2 coats, give your brother one. Same thing with the food. I was sick, and ye visited me. I was in prison, and ye came unto me. Then shall the just, or the righteous, then when he find us doing, because all this will shake up the world. See, they're not just giving food, and this teaching that we're reading about today is manifested in the teaching of the offering of the Gentiles that Paul demanded. Everybody familiar with that offering of the Gentiles that Paul demanded? A lot of people don't talk about that. It was the offering of the Gentiles. He went from city to city demanding that they funnel wealth into Jerusalem for food, for shelter, for clothing. That's why he told Timothy, listen, anybody coming to the church, you command them, if they got wealth, be ready to distribute. See, there was an administration going on that affected classes. They went to the working class, the poor people, the fishers, the tax collectors, the prostitutes. They went to these people, and they had a concrete, real administration going on. It wasn't this idealist thing. They just waited till Jesus come back. Jesus just finished saying, don't wait till he come back. He just finished saying, bless when I do come. Meaning when judgment, we don't know how this divine judgment going to look. Only thing we know, he said, know this, when it happens though, those who will be spared are those who are doing this. Now, how do we do this? We find it with the teachings of Paul, at least an example, but we're not getting into that tonight. Verse 37, then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee and hungered and fed thee, or thirsty and gave thee drink? When saw we thee a stranger and took thee in, or naked and clothed thee? Or when saw we thee sick or in prison and came unto thee? And the king shall answer, those who are about to have dominion over the world. You see why it's fit for you to rule the world? Because you knew how to take care of the people. So that's why the king gonna say, now you are able to be ruler in all my house, because you have shown yourself to stand for justice, to fight against class antagonisms, to help the oppressed, just like Isaiah said, just like Micah said, just like Jeremiah said, all of the prophets. Everything that the prophets stood for until Yah came and destroyed Jerusalem. He came with the clouds and destroyed Jerusalem and all of the nations by the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. Then he destroyed Nebuchadnezzar. Day of the Lord came upon Babylon. Then the day of the Lord came upon the Medes and the Persians. And the day of the Lord going to come upon these people. And what we're learning, that what we ought to be doing that will trigger this, and that when the judgment happens, since we don't know how it looks, we will be made safe, where he will look upon what we're doing, and the forces that's bringing the judgment will find an appeasement to save our souls. This is what he's saying for us to do. And notice the king answered and said unto them, verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of these least my brethren, ye have done it unto me. Y'all see that? He said, you have done this unto me. Then he says, then shall he say also unto them on the left hand. Now let's see who's on the left hand. Y'all ready to read about the left hand? Then he shall say also unto them on the left hand, depart from me, ye cursed. Remember he said that in Matthew chapter 7? Depart from me, ye workers of iniquity. They gonna say they done did all these religious works. We done did many wonderful works in your name. We done did all this. Matthew chapter 7 now. Now we learning in Matthew chapter 7 why he didn't know them. Depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire. See, this is real piety. When we do not hide ourselves from our fellow neighbor. We've been taught holiness and love. We've been taught this in idealist views. How do it really look? And it's perfected when your heart is for the people. Now look. He said, depart from me, ye cursed, in the everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was a hungered, and ye gave me no meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me not in. You mean to tell me the people who isn't doing these works, their life is in danger? And all of and he didn't say your own personal communes. Other than that, the disciples could have just stayed 120 and dwelt in Jerusalem, and they could have just waited until Jesus come. But they was commissioned to transform the world. That means they had to engage with the surrounding world, the proletariats. They had to be a testimony in the heavens against the principalities and powers, because some of them repented. I was a stranger, ye took me not in, naked, and ye clothed me not, sick and in prison, and ye visited me not. Then shall they say also, answering him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee a hungered, or a thirst, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, in prison, and did not minister unto thee? Do y'all see what's happening here? You see how they was really trying to literally look at the Lord? You see what the Christ teaching us right here? You was looking for him, an embodiment of a physical Jesus, when he said, I am realized where? Right in the people. That's where I'm realized at. But we've been taught to look for a man. Same thing with the Father. He said, how long you been with me? I done showed you the Father. All the time you've been with me. Why do you keep asking to see an object? But now we realize that Christ is realized in humanity. Interhuman relation. And the struggle for redemption for humanity, the war goes on. Ever since the days of Genesis, the war between the serpent seed and the woman seed, the war goes on, and the battle is hot. And the problem is that we're not taught about this war. We're sitting ducks. Then shall he answer them, saying, verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye did it not to one of the least of these, ye did it not unto me. And these shall go away where? Into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into everlasting life, because this is at his coming. So at his coming is the day of judgment, fervent heat. As Peter said, it shall burn up who? The wicked. Who being burned up right here? The wicked, no one else. That's what he said in the book of Malachi. Now, let's flip right back to Matthew 24 just to finish this off. So these communes, just as Karl Marx argued, They got this pie in the sky, air utopia, but they have separated themselves from the class struggle. Here we're reading right here in Matthew that Christ wants us in the class struggle. That's why we got to get our own ranks together. That's why I tell you, when people run around here acting foolish, you really doing a great disservice to yourself. Because God wants us to do a work. And if we're so blessed, we can do this work. But as you see, we don't have no time for foolishness, do we? And we're going to finish it off with this. Matthew 24 and verse 45. So then who is a faithful and wise servant? Y'all see who the faithful and wise servant is now? Whom his Lord have made ruler over his household to give them meat in due season. You see who this is now? They have right to rule over the earth because they're doing right and justice. Blessed is that servant whom the Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Now we finding out why they will be blessed, and now we have learned what they shall be doing. Verily I say unto you that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. So if you've been shown that you can distribute the earth's goods, you've been making sure people are fed, people are clothed, people are not, hungry and destitute. You've been making sure that they're whole and healthy. Yes. Blessed is that servant. You got rule over all my goods. That means the earth, all of the earth resources. Verse 48. And if that evil servant shall say in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and to drink with the drunken. See, they're not helping the people now. They're sophrieting and smiting the fellow servants. People say, well, how do we smite the fellow servants today? We smite them all the time. Every time we go to the grocery store, we are, what do they say? What do you call a guy who, he don't rob the bank, but he try to get away car? What do you call him? Not an assailant. What do you call him? What do you call that when you're a part of the crime? It'll come to me. There you go. We are accomplices, aren't we? Remember, all of the things that's being destroyed and accomplished. Thank you, Mother Jennifer. We are accomplices, because if we didn't support it, then they wouldn't be doing it. Why are they destroying the cows? Because we're accomplices. We help the market. Every time we go to the grocery store, those brothers and sisters down there working in the fields for pennies a day, bringing them groceries up there, we paying for it, right? Keeping the capitalists going, right? It's one thing to pay for. That's why I tell you, if they're going to nourish us, then we ought to be working towards their liberation. So I'm not saying don't go eat, but you eat. But if you're just going to eat and hang out with the drunk, hang out with the partiers, and live it up good until you retire and whatever, useless. But if these people are going to nourish us and we living off the backs of these children all over the world, bringing in these produce for us to feed us, then we better be working in their behalf. And we got to learn how to work in their behalf. And if we do it right, we can actually start to send some relief to them. Just like Paul sent relief to the brothers and sisters in Jerusalem. But those other teachings, I'm going off again. Let me finish this up so we can get y'all out of here. Verse 50. The Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he what? Looketh not for him, and in an hour when he is not aware of, and shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be what? Weeping and gnashing of teeth. When? When the Lord cometh in that day. See, at the coming of the Lord. Is that what happened in Jerusalem? The coming of the Lord, when he melted the mountains, he sent a great disaster into the land. All right? So we're going to open it up to show why these reactionary socialist communes, we must examine their doctrines, whether they're activists on YouTube, whatever they're talking about. We must scrutinize the doctrine. In order to do that, we got to learn the real doctrines. Or at least we got to search the scriptures. Because we've been having communes and all of this for centuries, and it hasn't made any changes. Now, I got other scriptures to go to talk about our participation, but for the sake of time, we're going to open it up for feedback and questions, okay? So with that, you can unmute your mics and you can give us some feedback or ask questions or whatever you want. The floor is open. Don't stay quiet too long. Y'all don't get me to talking again. I'm telling you, I don't want that. Get me to running my mouth. You make sure my sound is on. I believe my sound is on. So we'll be, God willing, next week will be our last week. And the manifesto, we'll be at section 4. Make sure.
Salam.
Sounds good. Who's that? Brother Zamila?
Yes, correct.
Shalom, brother. What you got for us?
Yeah, I just wanna focus towards the end. You use the scriptures, Matthew chapter 25, where it talks about the work that we need to do, because that parable it's, to me, it's challenging, because to do the right things, like before I go ahead, I just want to get the clarity when Yeshua says to these people who did not participate by clothing those who are naked, feeding those who are hungry. So what is it exactly what is it that it says? Because I found it difficult. I found it a bit confusing to me. What is it exactly that I should do to participate, to make sure that I'm doing what is right now? Because I see, we see people here along the street, especially where I'm staying. The number is growing of people who are, who are along the street here, seeking food. They are in groups of 50s, 60s, even more than hundreds. These people, you can see that they are hungry. They want something to, they want something to eat. But keep on, let's say I'm doing something, like I'm coming to them, I'm feeding, like I'm giving them food, even though I don't have enough food to feed them all. But if I'm doing that, am I contributing on that? Am I doing what is said in this scripture? Because I found it challenging, keep on feeding these people like that. It is not bringing any solution to me, if I may say yes. So I'm trying to find out from your side, what is it that this scripture, does it addresses that if I'm doing, if I'm feeding them, feeding people like this, am I doing what is said in this scripture? Or
yeah,
it is required?
You have those of us. Like, it's a few things I want to bring out, but the quick answer, yes, you are to the best of your ability. Okay. Now, the mentality that we got to get out of is individualist mentalities. And that's where it becomes really difficult when we see that these tasks that the Messiah is talking about, we look at it as doing it as individuals. In fact, when he was talking to a group of people. See, once we realize that, if we realize that we must do these things, and then we realize that we can't do these things alone, but we have a passion to do these things, then that necessitates within us a desire to organize. So when you're looking at what's happening here, when you don't see this happening per se that we know of as a record, when Jesus of Nazareth started off with 2 people. First thing he did was what? The beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, beginning of the teaching of Jesus of Nazareth, what was he doing? He was getting
like
together his disciples. Yeah, he was building a team. That's what he did first. So that's why I tell people, you got to build a team. With the teachings that we receive from the West are so individualistic, that we often, it's like a default mode. When we look at these teachings, we think of us or me doing it, or me and my family doing it. No. That compels us to work with other people to get it done. And if we know it needs to get done, then you're going to find it even that more passion to work together for a team. How do you build a team? Off of the doctrine of the kingdom of God, because now the team must be on one page. They all got to believe the same thing. They all got to do the same thing. Paul said the same frame of mind. Acts 2, Acts 4, one heart, one mind. That comes from a teaching. So we follow the pattern. To answer your question, we follow the pattern of the master. His first objective was to go teach the kingdom and gather those who was willing to hear and join on to do the work. This was the same administration of Paul. Before Paul didn't come out the gate as an individual bringing food down to the poor masses in Jerusalem. He didn't do that as an individual. He was writing to the people who he organized, right? He wrote a letter to Corinth. He wrote a letter to Galatians. These were people he put work in. Once he put work in, organized the people believed the doctrines because he tirelessly taught it and taught it and taught it to those. He started to find those, like them Jews we were talking about the other day. He started to find those Jews who, all right, they ready. They want to be a part. Once you find them, and and then he found them in Thessalonica. Then he found them in Colossae, all over, organizing, getting the people who want to do the work. Then this administration took on a whole nother level, where now he's writing to them. Listen, I want y'all to gather such and such when I come. I don't want no, he began to tell them what to do, and he was telling them, be encouraged to do it. Because if you are partaking in the spiritual things, it's no big deal if they partaking in your material. So we let them know, you do it and be willing to do it. But who he was talking to, people and administration that he had helped organize. And he didn't do that by himself. It was Barnabas. You understand what I'm saying? Silas. You had all of these men working together, and that's what we got to realize. No, you can't. This ministry was never intended for us to do it as individualists. The master didn't even do it as an individual. But yes, while we're individuals, you do what you can. You see somebody hungry, you can, but we can't. But we realize, like you said, it's so many hungry people. You don't have enough. Even if you didn't eat none of your own food and gave it all to them, you still couldn't satisfy. Because the poor will always be with us under these conditions. So these teachings and these questions we ask ourselves, the result is what? Organize. We must get these teachings out, and those who are Christ shall hear his voice and they shall respond. And while we're doing that, more ideas going to come. See, it'll be a mistake to try to figure all this out tonight, because it's things we don't even know about right now. Meaning, it's people waiting to come in here we ain't even met, that got resources we ain't even think about, because it's not even on our mind. See, these are the gifts out there waiting. We just got to get out there and hitting the ground running. So therefore, when we saying literature and doing it, getting stuff passed out, like I'm trying to get some stuff down here to one of our comrades and sisters down here where she is right now, and you know, we need laborers to put this stuff together. We need laborers put it together. We need networking. We got to organize, get tight. So it's not for you to do it by yourself, but you do what you can while you're alone. But we must organize. And with organized comes teachings, learning, studying. You understand what I mean?
Hey, Brother Judah. Hello?
Yes. Shalom, my brother.
Shalom, everyone. Okay, I'm confused, but on the whole other page, I'm total in agreement about what we should be found doing when he returns. But what I'm asking is, tonight was a pretty hard lesson as far as what role is he going to play? Will we see him? What's he going to do? Like the destruction, I understand how he uses the elements in the earth to do his bidding. He even uses the earth itself to do his bidding. But will we see him? When it says he's going to return and we shall be like him, what is all of that? What role is? And I'm not being blasphemous. I'm just asking the question. We're starting to understand our role in this, but now I'm getting confused on what's his role. And I need a little more insight. And I know I need to look at these because I'm starting to look at these scriptures differently. Now I need to look at them even more differently now because now I'm being thrown off a little.
Those good questions. Those good questions. He always playing his role. Our very strength and what we're doing and what he will cause to change from our activities is his role.
Yeah, I understand that.
You know what I'm saying?
That came out wrong. I understand that.
No. That's just That's the beginning. That's the beginning.
Okay.
I think I know where you're going though. So you very well may be talking about like a divine intervention of some sort, correct?
Exactly. That right there.
Yes. He didn't reveal to us exactly how that. He let us know he's coming with the clouds to do judgment. But he gave us isolated incidences of what's happening during these times. War, okay, the fall of Babylon, the collapse of the commodities. He's given us little clues on how it shall happen. You know, as it leads up to this, wars, rumors of wars, pestilence and disease. Heavens, he said the powers of heaven shall be shaken. Ethnic group against ethnic group, or as he say, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom.
Right.
All of these different things shall be taking place. He never exactly showed us the climax. Pretty much like he just never even really showed Moses this realization of him coming in the cloud, like this pillar of smoke. However that looked. So he never showed us that in its entirety. He just said he's coming. But when he comes, the ungodly, like I read earlier, they may be confused. They may not recognize it. See, that's the only way that they will fight against God. Because it said the nation shall be angry. Because the nations, the cities of the earth shall fall. This is what he says in Revelation.
Right.
So they're going to be, and in the book of Luke, he said they shall be, if you look it up in the Greek, they should be at their wit's end. Meaning they won't have any more answers. They shall be in perplexity, it says in the book of Luke. And automatically this is going to lead to more war and everything else. So we don't know exactly what happens to bring this at this climax of this divine intervention. But it's all leading up to it, that when it does happen, to some, it may just look like a natural disaster. But to others, as they're being converted, because remember, as things get worse and worse and worse, souls are likely to be converted more and more. And when it happens, everybody gonna see it. They're gonna realize something just took place. Okay?
Yeah, because
go ahead.
okay, because when I look at stuff like the resurrection of the dead, the first and the second resurrection. These things, from what my understanding has accumulated, is that these things are things that have to happen along the line of that divine intervention.
Yes.
So I know there has got to be some type of divine intervention, I would say. Now, I
Yes.
could be wrong, and I could be looking at these scriptures
No.
shallow.
No. Yes, we're not excluding a divine intervention. We're saying that will happen.
Oh, okay.
But the argument we're saying is, will it happen like we have been taught it will happen? Like the man coming in the clouds. But yes, the earth disclosing her dead, the change that Paul talks about, it shall be a metamorphosis taking place in the earth. No doubt. That's no question. We're not arguing that. But how it looks is what we're arguing. And what ought to be done to bring it about. Because remember, in this process, the saints are taking a part in this process. They're bringing about the process. If you notice.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
So every time, as we're being persecuted, as the nations fight against us, this encourages, or should I say, what do you say? It brings on this process because it's conjuring up the power of heaven to respond.
Okay.
If that's not confusing, everything we do brings on this process. That's why I say for the sake of his anointing.
So I'm good with that.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm good with that. Okay, cool. Yep. Gotcha. Now I am going to look deeper into these prophecies now in these scriptures pertaining to what we've always thought were. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
I just have to look at them differently now. But I've looked at all kind of stuff differently now that I've joined these classes and stuff, and my whole vision has been altered. So this is one area that I never looked into.
Yes.
So now this is another area. Man, you just twisted my whole thing up.
No. Listen, this is an area that we into studying with right now. I mean, we're into this study. We're doing it as just presently because it's just intriguing for the last few years or more. Just getting more into this area to really examine it, because we now have to look at what we all been taught. We believe he's coming, but how is he coming? That's the idea, you know what I mean? So
that's the idea, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And the sister who just typed that, you're absolutely right. Yeah, we all have to start looking at this stuff differently. I mean, everything, we got to turn over everything, it looks like.
Yes, we do. Like Paul say, renew the mind. Because a lot of the doctrines we received, it was still tainted with idealist doctrines or doctrines from the so-called churches.
Right.
You know what I mean? We flipped it over Sabbath day and all that other stuff, but some of the fundamentals still we carried over,
Right. All right. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you, my brother. Good questions. What are the works we need to be doing to reverse or dismantle this system? I don't know how long ago did she type that? That's what we was examining in Matthew chapter 25. So to get more into that teaching, God willing, we'd be able to present some teachings on the administration of Paul, because it's there, but it's behind the scenes. In fact, I've very seldom heard anyone ever teach on it ever. And that's a lie. I did read books a little later that talks about it. But for the most part, and that's scarce. How about y'all? Have y'all ever heard anyone talk about the administration of Paul, like talking about this work he had going on, getting all of this money and taking it down, and resource taken down to Jerusalem? Have y'all heard anybody talk about this?
Seldom. Really.
Yeah, I haven't heard it much myself. I'm not saying it's not out there, because but I haven't heard of, especially I haven't heard it on YouTube. When I learned more about it, was on books. But we begin to come to that conclusion as we learn in this. And that's what stuck out, like things what Paul was doing. If you're looking at it on the social scale, practically, now this collection for the saints was bigger than just what was traditionally taught. And then I stumbled across some writings on it, you know, where people really getting into this. But that's getting into these works. When you're by yourself, you're doing the best you can. You're doing the best you can. But others, you know, because some people are in certain areas, they just don't have the resources. That's why people have to pool their resources from different places. And we sort of have to bridge the gaps. And that's going to take more communication. That's going to take more than just like a class like this. But I think these classes right here, I want to use it to, what they say, catapult it, you know, to get that up and going. And then the more we learn, the clearer it'll become. And then the talents we do have, the more we learn, now we could put our talents in the context of this work. But if we don't really know the work, then it's hard to put our talents in that context. Are the prophets the sources of all doctrines we need to reread and relearn? That's the start. The prophets. In fact, what they call a Tanakh. Starting actually from Moses. Because he's going to give a lot of the, in Moses' language too, is going to give a lot of the figurative language that prophets will use. That's where we start. And the objective of the NMP, while we're reading the prophets, we want to bring in real life situations and revolutions and class struggles and relate it to the prophets so we can get like a visual. So we can get more of a visual on what these prophets was dealing with. Start, yes, if you will. In fact, start with the prophets, and while you're reading the prophets, if you can, because this is what our teaching with the rise and fall with Israel was dealing with. When you're reading the prophets, notice when you start reading the prophets, they're going to tell you what kings were reigning during the reign of Uzziah or during the reign of Hezekiah. From there, go into the Chronicles and the Kings. And that's going to give you a little glimpse of the social background and vice versa. So when you're reading in the Kings and it says during the days of Isaiah the prophet, when you go into Isaiah, so you got to put them both together to get this social background, the climate. And then we could start to learn their language when they're saying Jehovah came to do this and Jehovah came to do that and all this other stuff. We will have the background to see, well, what really happened that day? What really happened? Like Daniel, you see the beast come up out of the water, right? 7 heads, 10 horns. Oh, no, that was John. Daniel seen 4 beasts. You see one beast, dreadful and terrible, iron teeth, destroyed everything. Well, how did that look? Well, that was the 1,200 years or 1,000 years of the papal or the Roman reign. So you want to see this beast tearing everything up? We research European feudalism. It's going to give you, it's going to show you the social climate of the description of Daniel when it tread down the earth and destroyed everything. So maybe we'll learn more in these classes about feudalism. It's a lot we can go. It's a lot of roads we can take. And God willing, He'll give us the time, the longevity, and the health and strength, mind, body, spirit, and soul to do it. Just stay in prayer. So yes, start with the prophets and the Kings and the Chronicles. Put those two together.
Bro, Judah. Yeah.
Shalom.
Shalom. How y'all doing? I just want to chime in real quick. I can go ahead.
Yes, sir. You got that right.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I just wanted, it's something on my mind. I said to myself, I wasn't going to get in today, but it's some interesting topics the brothers and sisters been bringing out. So I would like to say if everyone could kind of go into deeper about this thing, because what I've noticed lately about the confusion, like you said, about the coming of Christ and what works should we be doing. And Matthew 7 speaks about, many are doing these works, but, it's like, man, Christ said, the master is going to say, I never knew you. And I think many people miss the mark of the confusion of labor, meaning I think the churches and the brainwashing has gotten so deep and the float off into heaven where everything that's in society now, the accumulation of capital and profit is done by labor. And, we have, especially the children of Israel, the sons and daughters that are supposed to be a light to the nations of how to run a so-called government and, business and, administration and things of that nature. When we're in destitute, we don't know what we should be doing. So we're out trying to fight for survival, trying to, do these works. But really, we've been caught up. A lot of people have been caught up in the system and accumulating this profit for the system. So people miss the labor work. The work, the earth should be burnt up by fire. But if you look at it, if you read the prophets, Habakkuk and other places, it talks about the work. Whenever you're getting, means of subsistence daily, you're actually helping the capitalists get robots to replace the people. But we're thinking, man, well, what's going on? And now we can't pay for food. Prices going up and the fire's killing slowly and slowly. So, and the last thing as far as Matthew 25, I know we touched on. If y'all want to look at deep, the clothing naked and match it up with Revelation 19, is for the other nations that bring Zion out of captivity. Because some nations, they have a conspiracy against us in Psalms 83. But some nations, not all nations are against us. They're going to help bring relief. And the kings are going to be like nursing fathers. It reads about Isaiah 49. And that's that means of production. Because a lot of people think that's just talking about, give them money, give them, little clothes and every that. But you can give us clothes and food, but we got to get up and work the next day. But if you give us means of production, that frees us to now set up business administration to go help the people working that's not, for cents an hour for these, unjust capitalist corporations. So, it's just little things like that. I'm not going to go too long, but I think, Brother Judah, you own it hard. And I noticed you had a teaching on this Matthew 24 a while back. I think I remember checking a look at about the hidden teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, and you were touching on, but now you went deeper tonight, brother. So that was good. I think you putting it together like even more deep as you go forward. So I think that's going to be really great for the people as you continue your teachings, man. And I just want to kind of chime in on that for everybody to kind of go deep into. I think it's going to help everybody a lot. So I just want to say that.
Appreciate you, brother. Good edification. We appreciate you on that one.
Oh,
good stuff. And two, like he made mention of like where the climax can go to, really with the offering of the Gentiles, and that's what I mean with Paul. It was a prototype, or should I say, a microcosm,
exactly,
of the offering of the Gentiles. What Paul was doing, the wealth of the Gentiles, he was bringing to the people. Now, in that process, as we work towards it, remember, look around practically. I made mention of it earlier. We are where we are today. We could look ahead, and believe me, I do what we have to do for the movement. I do what I have to do for the movement for now until I learn something better, a better way. But look, I don't really get a kick out of being a plumber. I mean, it's just not really anything that, just really excites me, especially since I got older. When I was younger, it was one thing, but now,
Yeah.
But I'm saying this, if we study the abolitionists, one come to my mind right away is Harriet Tubman. That's one thing that was striking similar to our world that stuck out with me, is that in order for her to fund her missions to help other people, she had to do odd jobs. And so therefore, even though we look to be free, the Most High, sometimes he got us to serve. We must serve a sentence until he free us up to do something else. And yeah, I mean, each mission she went on, she actually had to go and do odd jobs. So that's part of it. That's what Paul did, where he was able to go and organize in the churches, and they didn't take care of him. He did odd jobs. So now it's just about when we're doing our jobs and we're working, of course, we always trying to find something better to help us out where it's not taxing mentally or physically. But while we're doing it, then it's going to come down into where we're going to put it, our purse. You know what I'm saying? How we're going to, how this is going to work. But don't get discouraged. Keep it on, because Most High, He's going to bring us some liberation. But right now, some of us, we are working, but it's about what we do with the money we earn. That's going to be a big part in it. You're going to make sure that you put your portion towards the movement, or it's just all about partying and having fun. So, right now we're doing these odd jobs and we got to look back at it, or we work in our different professions and careers. Well, whatever we doing, that's how they did it before. That's how, in between time, that was something. Mother Harriet Tubman, she up there scrubbing floors. She up there, working, and then about to go on a mission and risk her life. So, the history is so important. That's how we look back. That's what Paul said in the book of Acts, remember? Why did he say that the prophets was written? For our admonition, right? What was he saying? History. All of this history been written for us to learn. Stay in prayer. We can get it done through the grace of God. When we stay in prayer, hopefully, God willing, salvation is near. But as long as we're doing the work, it'll be here before we know it. We just got to learn how to do the work and be joyful in doing it. And right now, we're in the boot camp stages. This is learning right here. This is exercise to go and wage war against the enemies. Good stuff, though. Good stuff. Anything anyone of y'all got to say tonight?
Just about what you were talking about earlier when we first started. One of the first things you mentioned was about people writing the scriptures off, right? The word, in terms of like
saying mistranslated and stuff.
Yeah, it's mistranslated. It's not interpreted correctly.
Yeah.
They remind me of the people that basically they cut themselves off from the kingdom, right? And then they cut other people off as well.
Yes.
Because as soon as you say this is mistranslated, there's something wrong with this word, then you're being wise in your own conceit.
I believe
at that very moment,
yes.
Right? And so these are the very people, they lead hundreds, thousands of people sometimes. Yep. So you're leading all these people astray.
Yep.
I feel like a lot of people, they may not even know they're doing it.
Exactly. Exactly.
They're in darkness and they really don't know.
Right. They get caught up in it.
Right.
Even the teacher themselves. Because Peter said, many will be deceived and deceive others. I can't remember how it was worded, but it's like they shall be deceived themselves and deceive others. It's not that they sit in a room somewhere figuring out how I can trick you, but because they've been deceived. And that's it, big time. And I've noticed the key. Once they say something wrong with the Bible, and that's one thing when I was looking at documentary on Jim Jones and listening to one of the things he did once he started to set up his commune. Man, they said he threw the Bible, threw it across the room. And once it landed, they the people was in the room, they talking to him. He said, did anything happen? Did lightning come down out the sky? All of a sudden he began to put himself as the authority. And this is so common when people say the Bible is mistranslated. They begin to put, who else the authority? If you the one saying it's mistranslated, right? All of a sudden now you taking this power upon yourself. And I believe, you're being wise in their own conceit. Not humbling yourself, well, maybe this is like, I don't know, this is like a contradiction. Maybe I got it wrong. No, that don't even come to their mind. No, the translators got it wrong. They out to get you. They deceived you. No.
That's the thing, that once that pride takes root in you, it's over with.
It could be. Either it's going to take a great humiliation or you're going to run headlong into it. Deeper and deeper and deeper. So
I think also then with like the Essings, right?
Yes.
And you talked about them leaving and going off and doing their own sect, and they weren't able to really affect.
Yeah, they wasn't as effective as, according to history, Onias III was supposed to have been the Essenes founder. And like I say, he's founded Maccabees. He was the prime minister. So, he was taking care of the people of the land. The Essenes, when they started their community, is just really isolated, isolated, strict, ascetic, as they say, real disciplined, strict, but they didn't have the same effects. Onias was assassinated, but they didn't have the same effect. So when Jesus of Nazareth came on, his commune had a totally different effect. It changed, the whole world knew, but you know what I mean?
Right.
They were upset at these people. So now it's communism. So I'm not going against community, but it's really what's coming out of it. What are we affecting? And in order for us to know that, we got to do the research. So that's why, getting all these books and stuff, because you got to know. I can sit up here and probably paraphrase most of this stuff, but I probably lie to you half the time because I'm forgetting. So I need to just go and look this stuff up. But it's helpful for people. Here's a resource. Here's a primary source or secondary source. Here, look it up for yourself. And then you make you come to your own conclusions.
I want to bring up, though, I see real fast.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to me, the perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when Jesus had, obviously the 12, but he had all the other disciples at the time, right? And when he talked about, eating my body and drinking my blood, right? Yes. How they all left, right? And then look at the other and said, are you going to leave too? Yes. But Peter and the rest of the disciples that stayed, they didn't see that as something crazy, or they didn't see that, as something ridiculous. They saw it as the words to eternal life. So they understood that. They understood something that the rest of the people that left, they didn't understand.
That could be. Or
that's what it seems like to me.
In essence, I agree what you're saying. But in that particular case, they probably didn't know what he meant. But they believe that everything else they've been learning from him, that this might be a hard saying, but I'm willing to stick it out because so far you've seen him. You got the words of eternal life. So even if they didn't get it at that moment, because it doesn't say,
right? Okay.
But they stuck around because they were so hungry.
Okay.
That they, So in essence, in principle, what you're saying is true. They knew other things, of course they did. Being with him privately, talking to him. So when he said something like that, well, the master done said some stuff before. So, let's stick around. So, that hunger for that word kept them. The other ones, like you said, they walked off. I think eventually broke down to 120. So that means thousands of people are left. Thousands.
But that's even how it is today, Like, there's just not a lot of people who are on that correct path.
Right. Now, to be fair, they came back. Remember? So after they now the disciples begin to get strong in that word, they went back out. And then when they went out there teaching not too long, they said, man, they felt pricked, like, wow, this was. And now he's, they coming back for those who was for him, You have some schemers, Ananias and Sapphira and all of them, you have some schemers, the Bible point out, but for the most part, that assembly began to grow into multitudes. So when you're looking at it, even that's still a remnant. Like I said, you're looking at what? 40 million, just say 40 million so-called black folks here in America. You just get what? 1% of them. Just them, for example. But now you're talking about if we're appealing to the humanity, you know what I'm saying? No, it's not just blacks, it's Chinese, it's white, all of our brothers and sisters.
Right.
So our remnant turns out to be thousands, really.
Which is why he says countless, right?
Yep.
Before the throne.
Yep. So we got work to do, and it's all possible. And if it's not, if a cat say he gonna die trying to make some money, right? Then he can't make it, he gonna die trying, then hey. Beautiful. We will be getting I'm sorry, Mother. I did get your address. I got your message. We didn't call you, but we have another volunteer. We're going to type and help assemble some literature. Good news. Hallelujah. That's good. That's what we need. Beautiful. We will be giving you a call or email or something. We're going to be touching down with you because we definitely got some stuff to get together. Hopefully we can get some literature down in Guatemala. And did you do that article on land grabbing? Was just the next thing up? Or did you do that on purpose?
What do you mean?
Was it last week or 2 weeks ago you did it on land grabbing?
Mm-hmm.
Was that just the next thing in the line, or did you just do that?
That was that would have been like the newsletter, but I couldn't really get everything together. But I wanted to get that out before Thanksgiving.
Okay.
So I was like, all right, just get this out and
Okay.
have it in time for, you know, the holidays, so
Okay.
people can have like the you know, still relevant
Gotcha.
time.
I
So,
got you.
Yeah.
Because
Hey,
I'm
all you
trying
had
to
to
get
do-
something together to send down to so she's gonna be there to January down in Guatemala, and they land grabbing down there. So she wanted to get her something down there. I started something, so I want to put it out on the table. Maybe we could work something out because I could use some help on this. Go ahead, brother. I'm sorry.
Hey, and one more time. I know I called you this week and I gave you I tried to get it, my part, what I'm doing, done before Shabbat, like I said, but I didn't finish, but it'll be up within the next couple of days or it'll be ready. So this first one, now that I got this one done, I know the work that I got to do. And then,
Yes.
like I said, it's time consuming. I'm still doing 13 hours a day, 5 days a week, doing the music, being a pops, you know what I'm saying? Being a husband, all of this. So I'm working it, but I think you're gonna like what I'm putting together. And once this one done, this is gonna be the template for the rest of them. So this one was pretty just a little. It was hard doing, but it's all good. I just want to say I wasn't fronting. I got you. All right.
And you know I don't believe you are, and I'm gonna tell you this because I understand all of the things that everyone is doing. I don't want you to burn yourself out. So our thing is, look, if we see that you in the work and you love the work, the Most High gonna get it done when He ready. You understand what I'm saying? And if you love the work, it's just what you're gonna do. You're gonna do it at every opportunity you're gonna get a chance to do it. But you still got to get your rest. You got to, all of that is part of your health. So
absolutely, yeah.
We're not on this end, get this done, and this not. I mean, we're not really. You get it done. And as long as your heart is in it, we know you're gonna get it done in the proper time. You understand? So yeah, no sweat, no sweat at all.
My man. All right.
No sweat. Yes, mother, we will be contacting you. We'll find out. And she says she'll be willing to type and assimilation. Okay. So what we're going to do, it's been suggested after the last class, we're going to hold another meeting. And there we're going to get together and hold this meeting to see who can do what, where people are, what kind of resources we need to get to people to do this and do that, whoever willing. We're not forcing anything because people got to learn it. Everyone don't have resources or the time. Stay in prayer. It'll get done. So, Mother Jennifer, I'll ask you definitely to be at that meeting. It's a few other people. We want to be anyone can attend it. But we could start to nail down on what we need to do to get Mother Jennifer's or whatever resources she need to help us out to get some literature together. Whether it's help type the newsletter, whatever it is, other literature. So,
I was thinking about that leadership class that I went to.
Yes.
And a lot of it was about organizing and creating and organizing a team. But it was, you kind of had to have an initial idea of what you were literally going to do.
Yeah.
So I was kind of wondering what that looks like.
When you supposed to get some like an outline, some sort of that class you went to, because you said they had a book.
Yeah, I didn't get to talk to. I never went to talk to the people, but I have the workbook itself. Yeah. So I can work on kind of taking a look at that.
Or if you give me a couple of copies or something, I can look at it. We could sort of brainstorm.
I think I'll probably put it into a PDF too, so that we can send it out
to everybody. That'd be good.
God willing, I'll do that before the meeting though, so people has the chance to look at it and look over it. Yeah, and so everybody can kind of get ideas of what the process can kind of look like.
I think that'll be real good. I think that'd be really helpful for all of us to get educated in that area, because it sounds like they got some good stuff that we could.
It was really good.
Yeah.
It was really good.
So yeah, that'd be real good. get us some copies so we can review it, and then we could bounce it around, come out with something to start with. So that's all good. I'm pleased. I'm happy.
That, by the way, when we did the conference, we had to run through this whole thing in 2.5 days, but it's not meant to do that. Like, you are meant to take your time with each step.
Okay.
And, you know, really work with each other to,
I got you.
to basically you want to, it's a part of making sure you are on one accord also.
Yes.
And you're like, basically you are making your mission statement before you do anything else. So everybody has to be in agreement with, okay, what are we actually doing? What are the specifics that we're trying to do? So I'm just putting that out there because we're talking about having a meeting afterwards, but I can pretty much guarantee
of course. Right. Of course. Yeah, we'll probably look for that little transition. And of course, we want a couple weeks, but we all have it. Yeah, I'm excited about that. I definitely want something. I want to get a copy. You ain't lying. And I try to clear the thing out, but yeah, I like them anyway. I like the paper where I can make copies. All right. So this will be coming up. We'll keep everyone posted. Thank you, Mother Thompson. For your house as well. And yes, until the next time, we say shalom, peace to all of the brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, and all of us who's searching for the sincere. Until the next time, we'll say shalom and blessings to you. We get out. And I guess I can go and probably eat dinner. I'll eat dinner late on Fridays. Shalom. And it's cold too. I might be like, look, meeting postponed this week.